saben.
Peste comunista, Soros y su peste comunista. La putrefacta vida. USA, USA, USA. Toda estafa a la democracia. No otra estafa. América. Front 24. Patriotas contra comunistas. One nation under God. George Soros, criminal, estafador de la democracia. USA, God bless America. George Soros, criminal, estafador de la democracia. No a la peste comunista. God bless America. God bless America, my home, my sweet home. Dos carteles duros. Quantum Front, Renase, Blackstone, Black Borders. Todo el cartón criminal, el cartel criminal de George Soros, comunista. George Soros, criminal, estafador de la democracia. No a la peste comunista. No al cartel Soros, Blackstone, Black Border. Make America great. God bless America. My home, my sweet home. One nation under God. Dios, patria, libertad, familia, vida.
Thank you.
No a la peste comunista, George Soros. Criminal, estafador de la democracia, George Soros. No a la peste comunista. No George Soros, criminal, estafador de la democracia.
on the other side of this post.
Just
Move out of the way.
Just pass.
Public clear.
No, but the cops just told us that we had to do that. Thank you, though. Yeah.
We'll get out of your way.
It's like a handicap thing.
Thank you.
Justice. America, my home, my sweet home. Zone 24. One nation under law. With justice and freedom for everyone. No a la peste comunista and control. No al cartel de Soros, el criminal estafador de democracias. Dominio del Palmas y Hidra. No a la peste comunista, a la estafa.
didn't want the attention. I'm sure they've done it before. Probably close to the camera.
Beach ones, they have a big fat slurry. Yeah,
It's like a blunt. They take one.
Gotta come back this way. Back this way. Watch your step. If you can come behind this camera, that'd be great. Thank you. That guy. Can you get behind that guy? Behind that guy? That'd be great. Thanks. That's nice. They're blocking the roads.
obtaining classified information, obstructing justice, and then making false statements. If convicted, he faces the possibility of years in prison. This is the most serious charges he has faced yet. Let's head to John Sparks, who's in amongst the crowd, our international house here in Miami. And John, I mean, it's
head of a pig on a stick. I'm not sure what that represents. Perhaps Donald Trump's criticisms of his former Attorney General Bill Barr, who said that if half the allegations contained, which will be read out to Donald Trump this afternoon, if half those allegations are true, then Donald Trump is toast. But majority of protesters here are not buying that. Should we go? Let's go and have a walk, shall we? Because what you've got is protesters coexisting with all of the major media outlets in the United States, lots of international broadcasters like ourselves as well. Just a warning, we may hear some bad language. Try to avoid it, but we may. Let's go towards the front of the courthouse here. See, there's no segregation here at all between the media, between the protesters, between pro and anti-Trump supporters. We know, there you can see, that's the police line there, and it's basically represented by a piece of yellow plastic strung along the palm trees, and there's some police officers with bikes there. It's pretty fluid, and to my eyes, rather unorthodox, but Miami police say this is the way they do it here. We do know from federal officials that they do have concerns about the way things are set up here. They would have preferred more substantial barriers around, more substantial barriers in front of the courthouse. Feels very fluid, and you can see, and we have seen arguments breaking out. Also seen some of the commentators from major broadcasters here, people who are perceived to be too liberal or communist or Marxist, but the pro-Trump supporters going over to their tents. See some people over here and going to barrack them, tell them exactly what they think of their programs and their media personalities. Here we go. And one of the concerns here is that...
You know what's going on over there? I'll tell you what's going on.
Okay,
that's a fake.
Tell me what's going on.
That network is like CNN. It's the CNN.
Okay.
Hispanic CNN.
Okay.
They're fake news.
Okay, fake news. You don't like CNN. You don't like them being here.
I don't like CNN.
Why are you here? Why are you here today? Why did you feel the need?
Well, because I admire President Donald J. Trump. He was an incredible president. His record is impeccable. He governed in a way that we never imagined. Peace, prosperity. He loved the minorities. He didn't want people to hate each other the way that Obama did. That's why I'm here.
You know, he faces very serious charges. Obstruction of justice, willful retention of classified documentation.
Nothing compared to the crimes that the Bidens have been committing. Where did that money came from? Tell me the $10 million. Does that bother anybody?
Okay.
As vice president, he received million.
Only 10 million?
And guess what? No, well,
Okay,
that
okay.
we know. And guess what? From Ukraine.
Okay.
And all of a sudden we want to send
Okay,
millions.
there we
of
go.
dollars.
I mean, you hear that a lot here. Joe Biden receiving money, or Joe Biden's family receiving money from Ukraine. Allegations. But Donald Trump will get his day in court. There it is. He is expected to arrive at 3 p.m. He will be arrested. He will be read his rights. They'll take his fingerprints electronically. He won't have to pose for a mugshot, we understand. Being the former head of state does come with its advantages. They're going to use a pre-existing photo. And then the arraignment will begin. He's got himself a local lawyer, which means that they can go ahead with the arraignment. That's basically where the prosecutor reads the charges to Donald Trump, and then he enters his plea, guilty or not guilty. So very lively scenes here in front of the court. Let's go back to Anna now.
Yes, thank you, John. Febrile scenes indeed outside the courthouse. That is where Donald Trump is heading. Currently, though, he is inside his Doral resort to the west of the Miami International Airport, west of where we are in downtown Miami. We've just seen police outriders, as you can see, standing by, getting ready, no doubt closing the roads, waiting for Donald Trump on his motorcade with his security detail to take him on this journey. Take about 30 to 40 minutes, we understand, as he heads towards the coast east of where he is currently. But this is a big day for the former US president. Let's bring in Alex Soto now, former federal prosecutor in the Southern District of Florida, which is where this jurisdiction is, partner now at Friedman, Fells and Soto. Let's start with the broad brush, shall we? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is bad. How serious is this for the former president?
Well, given the allegations and the specificity of the allegations in the indictment, and the fact that much of the strength of the case lies in Donald Trump's own words, coupled with the fact that there are several obstruction charges, I'd say this is a 10.
Yes, and no time to play on one of the 4 championship courses at Doral today. We saw that at Bedminster, didn't we, after that indictment. And some people, surprised by the level of detail in the nearly 50 pages of that indictment. What jumped out for you? What is the key parts of the evidence that the special counsel is trying to show against Donald Trump?
Well, I think the key part of the indictment for me is the way that it's laid out. The fact that initially the allegations make very clear that Donald Trump was aware had knowledge of the classified documents in his possession.
So these are the audio recordings of conversations he had with, one was a writer and a publisher and staff members, showing people some of the documents and the context of them, and saying, I should have declassified these, I can't now, you shouldn't be looking, they're secret. It's that, isn't it?
Well, even prior to that, there are several text messages between employees at Mar-a-Lago, where his house is, detailing his efforts to review the boxes of classified information before subpoena, thereby proving that he was aware of boxes and boxes and boxes of documents that he had that were classified, and he was moving them around even before the subpoena was issued. Thereafter, there were efforts to conceal the production of those documents, and there were conversations, as you put it, that make clear that he was aware that these documents had not been declassified and that he didn't have the authority as an ex-president to declassify them.
So today, let's talk about what happens today, first of all, shall we? First of all, he will be arrested. Talk us through what happens on that 13th floor. This is one of the bigger courtrooms, isn't it? 13-3 it's called. I mean, you've worked in this building, many, many times. Just paint the picture for us if you can, because critically, cameras will not be allowed in this time.
Right. Well, I imagine that we're set for 3 p.m. In order to make this first appearance for Donald Trump his own. And typically, initial appearances begin at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. So I imagine they've cleared the courtroom to allow him to appear on his own. And so it's just going to be him, which is a special accommodation, of course, for the former president. But I think it's going to be rather quick. Essentially, Magistrate Judge Goodman is going to advise him of the charges against him, the statutory maximum sentences that he's facing if convicted,
Which are what, then? Spell that out for us.
Sure. So he's facing 31 counts of willful retention of national defense information. And those carry maximum sentences of 10 years per count, so 31 counts. And then there are a series of obstruction counts. Each of them carry maximum sentences of 20 years, with the exception of some of the counts relating to false representations to an FBI agent, and those carry maximum sentences of 5 years. Now, those counts, if convicted of all those counts, would not be stacked on top of one another. In other words, he's not facing 310 years for the first 31, but all of those things are taken into account during sentencing, again, if he's committed. He's entitled to the presumption of innocence, of course, before that.
Will we hear a plea today, and will we get a time, a date for the trial to take place?
We will. There will be a plea entered today, and that's part of the procedure for first appearance and arraignment. He will likely be arraigned and enter a plea of not guilty. He will also ask for the entry. He'll probably waive the reading of the indictment for your viewers, just so you know that all 38 counts probably will not be read aloud. That's pretty unusual. So he'll waive reading, enter a plea of not guilty, request entry of the standing discovery order, and request a trial by jury.
Alex, stand by.
Sure.
The motorcade is leaving. Let's take a look at the latest pictures from Doral. As I said, it is to the west of where we are. 30 to 40 minutes we're anticipating this journey to take. He will be with his security detail. No doubt also those attorneys who have signed up. There was a difficulty finding a lawyer. We are told that a Florida-based lawyer called Christopher Keyes has now filed a notice of appearance. Obviously, Donald Trump has a somewhat turbulent relationship with lawyers. Two quit last Friday. He tells us, Donald Trump, he's feeling great on his departure from Doral. Certainly his son Eric, who's with him, said that earlier to us as well. He is feeling great ahead of what is, Alex, a historic day.
It is. It's a historic day. No president has ever been federally indicted. This is now his second indictment following the state indictment in New York. And so it is a historic day, and it's a bit of a surreal day for us because this is taking place in our backyard.
Why is it taking place here?
It's taking place here because largely, the events largely occurred in this district. This district is comprised of the counties beginning in the south of Key West and going north all the way through West Palm Beach and to Fort Pierce, and the events took place largely in West Palm Beach at his home.
Lots of questions about the trial judge who was randomly assigned because she has had prior involvement in this case, Judge Aileen Cannon. We will not see her today, though, will we?
We will not. It's not typical for a district court judge assigned to a case to preside over a first appearance or arraignment. That's typically left to a magistrate judge. And in this case, the magistrate judge who's handling this case, Jonathan Goodman, is on duty. He just happens to be on duty this week. So it's just a matter of chance for him.
We talked about the timing. The special counsel assigned to this case wanted to have a speedy trial. Now, there is, as I understand it, a Speedy Trials Act, which means things are pushed through quickly. The earliest date for that would be towards the end of August. Would anybody be ready to start this in August? Or will the defense, Mr. Trump's defense, try to push this back, delay it so long that it happens after the presidential election next year?
Well, I'm sure that my former colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office down here are going to announce ready. Once they've indicted the case, they're going to be ready to proceed. I believe that one of the defense strategies for the Trump team is going to be delay. And so I believe they're going to be looking to file motions which will toll the speedy trial requirement. And in fact, the government is required to prepare something called a speedy trial report so that the judge is aware of all of the exemptions or exceptions to the speedy trial days so that she can calculate the time for trial.
Well, it's all fascinating, isn't it? And in terms of what it does for the divisiveness in American politics, for President Trump, people have been saying, you know, this is legally bad, but politically, at the moment, it's not. He's talking about small dollar donations, you know, the people asking for money being at their absolute highest. In fact, he's posted earlier today saying that if you can please consider making a contribution of even $1 to show the resilience of our movement in the face of the most vicious attack to date, please do so. The statement from Donald Trump Patriot, please say a prayer for America today because our justice system is dead. There they go, on the move then, down the highway towards here. At about 3 p.m, the Biden Department of Justice will have its leading opponent, me, arraigned at a federal courthouse in Miami, despite having committed no crime. I want to take this moment to thank you for all of your support. I am blown away by all of your donations, your support and your prayers. You know more than anyone that we will prevail, just like we always have. We will win, we will save our country, and we will make America great again. The words there of Donald Trump just a short time ago from Doral. As we watch these pictures then, describe the scene for us if you can, Alex. Obviously he's got local police, Miami County Police no doubt, anti-security detail as he makes his way here, but that's quite a motorcade.
It's quite a motorcade, probably much to the chagrin of all the citizens of Miami-Dade County who are going to be stuck in traffic as a result. Probably about 30 minutes from Doral where he was, so he should be here shortly. And one of the reasons I believe that this initial appearance is happening in Miami as opposed to West Palm Beach, because there are duty judges, magistrate judges in West Palm Beach, is because this is probably the more secure of the facilities within the district.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because there's been a lot of criticism about the security here. It's yellow tape and plastic barricades. You know, contrast other scenes we've seen, at least some metal barricades. And John Sparks, I know you're down there. There's no separation of different rival groups. There's no separation from the international journalists who've gathered in great numbers to cover this. And yet the Miami Police Department say they are very ready. Be there 5,000 or 50,000 people who turn up here today.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, from my perspective, this is an unorthodox situation. You've got no segregation, a lot of pro-Trump supporters. There is a large police presence, but for the most part, we've got police officers on bicycles and a yellow police tape surrounding the courthouse. And you've got a very fluid situation where Trump supporters are able to approach various broadcasters who've set up in this plaza in front of the courthouse and essentially barrack the commentators, the presenters of television stations that they don't like, television stations that they think are left-wing or too liberal. It's a very unusual situation, challenging broadcasting situation, I think, for them. There's a lot of people here. Many Trump supporters bust in this morning from different parts of Florida. There are people from Donald Trump support clubs, evangelical Christians, a wide range of people. And it is very lively, very loud here. We have heard some arguments breaking out. There are a few anti-Donald Trump protesters here as well, not very many. And I think that is a concern for federal police officials. They do have a conceal and carry law on guns. People can carry weapons that are concealed with a permit. And that's a concern, obviously, particularly if arguments break out. Certainly seen a build-up in the numbers here. There are a lot of people here, a lot of vehicles decked out with Trump flags, that sort of thing, and a lot of impassioned comments. People, banners, flags saying, "I stand with Trump. Trump was robbed of the last election. I pray for Trump." Here we've got a stick with a pig's head on it. I believe Donald Trump called his former Attorney General, Bill Barr, a gutless pig. I assume that is what that is a reference to. Bill Barr thinks that if half the allegations are true in the indictment, then Donald Trump is toast. A lot of very derogatory signs and banners about Biden as well and the Biden administration. People here feel that the current American president is using the Department of Justice and the FBI to eliminate their main political challenger, Donald Trump. That very deeply rooted view here. People say, look, Biden, Obama, Hillary Clinton, they're corrupt, nothing's been done about them. Much more difficult for them to accept. We've just come out of the largely more chaotic area, but it's much more difficult for people to accept that Donald Trump may have questions to answer in relation to the retention of classified documents in his Mar-a-Lago residence, his Florida home and club. Difficult for them to accept that he didn't want to give them back, that he was hiding and concealing those documents, that he was obstructing justice. People don't want any part of that. The whole thing is corrupt in their view. So yes, very lively scenes here, lots of arguments, and the numbers here certainly growing. Anna?
Yes, growing but still small. And I know, John, that you were outside Doral yesterday. The police chief there said there were about 80 to 100 people. You know, the call for the MAGA supporters to come down, is that really being followed, do you think? Or actually, have we seen it dwindle over recent months?
Significant numbers. I'd say a couple of hundred people so far. These are the hardcore. This is representation of the base. Here we go, got flags, InfoWars, Trump 2024, Take America Back. I mean, this is the Trump hardcore. And we were at a rally last night where a Trump firebrand called Carrie Lake was trying to whip up support. She was asking people to drain their bank accounts, drain their personal bank accounts, to give it to Trump, to give it to the Trump campaign, to help him fight to take the country back. And you know, people are receptive to that message. People are really committed, and you can see it here. A lot of people prepared to do whatever it takes, at least that's what they say, do whatever it takes to save their country, to take their country back. They feel it's under threat from the deep state, the Biden administration, the fake news media, and they're working hard to save their nation, to take it back. And the figurehead for all this, of course, is Donald Trump. He attracts in my view, near some religious devotion. Something of an anointed saint for people here. It's quite extraordinary to see. We certainly saw it last night. Carrie Lake preaching to the converted. Interestingly, though, she said that the hardcore Donald Trump supporters need to reach out to Democrats. They need to convince them to come over to their side. And I think that's a really interesting point, because I think one of the difficulties is scenes like this are not attractive for many independent voters, and also for Democrats themselves. And Donald Trump has a base, a very secure base, but he may not have the support to actually win a presidential election. I don't think that Carrie Lake, for example, is particularly worried about the indictment itself. She thinks Donald Trump will be able to postpone it. He can play a legal card to postpone the proceedings and then pardon himself if he makes the presidency, which he is absolutely convinced he will. So in a sense, this is an opportunity for a lot of Donald Trump supporters to show their strength, to show their colors to the nation. Does it turn people off in the rest of America? I think that's an important question. I mean, the indictment is serious, very, very serious. It's a well put together document. Many analysts say the allegations are damning, but you know, people don't want to hear that here. If Donald Trump's made some mistakes, well, they say the Biden administration, the Biden family, well, they've done a whole lot worse. People just don't want to go there. Certainly does have the feeling, though, here of a religious gathering with a leader who generates this extraordinary devotion, Donald Trump. Anna?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, Action? I spoke to somebody from the Lincoln Project, Republicans Against Donald Trump, recently. He called the people you're talking about there a cult, but they, of course, voted in him as US president. It is likely he will be, if the polls are correct, the nominee for the Republican Party once again. So the question is, why can he stand? You know, twice impeached, twice indicted. Alex Soto is still with me. Why can he still stand?
Because there's no prohibition to running for the presidency based on either having been indicted or even having been convicted of a federal or state offense. So he can run and he can hold office.
Well, I mean, it's utterly extraordinary. In other countries, I'm sure this would not happen. Question is, if he gets sent to jail, can he be president from jail?
That would not be a legal impediment. It'd be a practical impediment, probably. It's up to the voters to decide.
Will it come to trial, do you think? This case, would he ever plea?
He doesn't strike me as the kind of person who either capitulates or admits fault. So I would anticipate that this is going to go to trial.
We understand that the attorneys we talked about earlier, Christopher Kise, who is already admitted to the Florida bar, practices here in the Southern District of Florida, and Trump's New York-based lawyer, Todd Blanche, are in this motorcade with Trump on their way. They certainly, I think, all had dinner together at Doral last night alongside Eric Trump, who also said, you know, his father's doing great. Donald Trump telling us earlier that he is doing great. We'll wait and see when he comes to court. But this will be quick, won't it? Up and down. We saw them just passing Miami International Airport, planning to head there later tonight, back to Bedminster, New Jersey, where he'll be making his views known in a news conference, 8:15 local time, 1:15 a.m. We'll bring that to you live on Sky News, the first words of Donald Trump after this, we anticipate. But yes, so why is it so quick? Is this just an in and out, effectively?
It's an in and out. As I said earlier, he'll be advised of the charges against him, the maximum penalties, and he will plead not guilty and ask for the entry of the standing discovery order in order to receive the documents that the government needs to produce to him in order for him to defend himself. That's the procedure, and that's all that's necessary.
Alex, stay there. Let's bring in now Donald Trump's former criminal attorney, Timothy Parlatore. Very good to have you on. You might be watching yourself the motorcade heading here towards this downtown Miami court case. It is a historic day, no doubt about it. And to quote his former Attorney General, Bill Barr, is he toast?
I don't think so. I think that there's a lot of steps that we have to get through before we determine that somebody is toast. You know, this is a case that I think is going to be hotly contested from the beginning in motions, motions to dismiss, motions to suppress, and a lot of motions that are going to involve instances of prosecutorial misconduct by the DOJ team, the special counsel team that investigated and is now prosecuting this case. So a lot of those things can derail this this entire prosecution before it even gets to a jury. When they actually get the discovery, then they'll be able to have a much better idea of whether they, you know, what they can present to the jury. But for right now, it's a lot of legal issues.
Yes, I was just going to interrupt you to say that Donald Trump has just posted on Truth Social saying, on my way to the courthouse witch hunt. You know, is it getting traction, his argument, to think about the weaponization of the Justice Department as part of the Biden administration? You know, does that play into Republican voters?
Well, you know, that's a political question, which, you know, I'm a lawyer. I just focus on what happens inside the courtroom. I will say this. When you are prosecuting a case of this magnitude and this sensitivity, you have to really make sure that you're doing it cleaner than you would otherwise do it. And in this case, where you have a prosecution team that's already committed so much instances of misconduct, and just last night they announced that they're adding a new member of the team, somebody from the Southern District of Florida, a veteran prosecutor who has previously been sanctioned for illegally recording conversations between defense counsel and their clients. That's not a very good look, and it's something that does play into both the public political narrative of this being a witch hunt, but also the legal wrangling over, is this prosecution team breaking the rules in bringing this case?
Well, let's talk about breaking the rules, shall we? It was Mr. Trump who took documents from the White House. He held on to those documents. He secured them entirely inappropriately. He then lied to the FBI, to a special counsel. He got his attorney to lie to the FBI about this. He obstructed justice. You know, talking about telling the truth in this case, there's only one way to look, isn't there?
Well, those are allegations. those have not been proven yet. We would have to have the evidence come out. And in order to prove that case, the government has to prove every element of that beyond a reasonable doubt. And if they want to prove that he's the one that's breaking all the rules, they need to follow the rules themselves.
Tell us about your role in all of this. It's my understanding that you were involved in the case and you resigned last May. Why did you go?
So I did resign about a month ago, and it was due to internal structural issues that I felt were preventing me from doing what I felt was necessary to fully defend the client.
If you were still defending the former president, what would your defense be in this case?
If I were still on this team, I would be really focusing these pretrial motions on every single legal defect in the case and every single instance of misconduct by these prosecutors in an effort to derail this before it ever gets anywhere close to a jury. I would then be going through all of the discovery to see what are the best strategies for the jury, but that's not something that I could really state at this time without reviewing the discovery.
Tim Parlatore, we're just watching actually as that motorcade arrives outside the court here. Looks like they're heading into an underground car park. The suggestion is that that is the way he will go in. He chose a different route, obviously, in that district state case in New York, where he decided to go in openly. Cameras are allowed then in the hallway and stills from the court. That is not going to be the case this time. Can I just ask you one more question, if you don't mind, which is about the relationship with his attorneys? Here, it does appear that he hid information from his attorney, and he got the attorney to lie to the FBI. Why would he do that?
And again, those are allegations, and without seeing the actual discovery to see if there's something to back that up, I can't answer why somebody would do something until it's first proven that they did it.
Do you think it was that because for too long he saw his lawyers as attack dogs, as business or political agitators? You think of Michael Cohen or Rudy Giuliani, not people who offer wise counsel with the backbone of ethics.
But once again, you're asking me why he did something that has not yet been proven that he even did. So I can't really get into that.
Do you know Evan Corcoran well? How does he feel that prosecutors say they have sufficient evidence to establish that Trump used his attorney to commit a crime?
Evan is a good friend, and I think Evan is a very honest and ethical person, and he did the best that he could under the circumstances.
Do you ever wish you'd never taken the job? And what was the allure? Was it the sort of the power that surrounds Donald Trump?
No, not at all. No, I'm a lawyer. I don't get involved in the power and the politics. That's not my deal. I was interested in this case and still do find it an interesting case because it involves very interesting issues of fact and law. And one of the things that I've built my career on is taking on interesting cases, particularly cases where the government is not doing everything properly and ethically in pursuing that. And one of the roles that I see myself performing in a lot of these cases is holding the government accountable, that just because you don't like this defendant, or because you think that he's a bad person, or you think he shouldn't be running for president, that is not a reason to break the rules to try and bring a case against him. If you're going to bring a case against somebody and try and put them in jail, you need to do it right, you need to do it cleanly, you need to do it respecting all the rules.
Well, let's talk about how you think the rules are being broken to bring this case. Certainly one Republican representative suggested earlier today that there was a Presidential Records Act. You get a grace period of 5 years. You can sort it all out in your own time. That's just plain wrong, isn't it?
Well, I'm not going to comment on what the politicians are talking about. When we talk about the rules here, what I'm talking about is you do not lie to a federal judge when you're in a courtroom. You do not suggest to a jury that the invocation of constitutional rights is evidence of guilt. You do not attempt to extort and threaten an attorney for a witness by dangling a judgeship in front of them to try and get their client to change their story. These are things that no reasonable ethical prosecutor would ever do.
If this comes to trial, will the elements of motive and intent be part of this? Why he kept the documents, what he intended to do with them, and if so, you know, what is the answer to that?
Well, in the American criminal justice system, the burden of proof is on the prosecutors. And so the question is something that you should be asking Jack Smith, because he's the one that has to prove willful retention of documents. The defense does not.
And one final question. I know you probably won't want to put your crystal ball gazing eyes on this. Will the 45th President of America go to jail?
I don't believe so. I think that this is a case that will be likely derailed in the pretrial stages because of the misconduct of these investigators. And my hope is that if that happens, then the American people can move past this, and instead the legislature can turn their attention onto DOJ and say, you know what? We have a problem with ethics in our prosecutorial ranks, and we need to fix that, because while some people may be okay with that when it's being targeted at Donald Trump, it's not appropriate to have in our system when it's targeting any citizen, whether you like them or not. And so my hope is that there will be reform in the ethics of DOJ as a result of this case.
Timothy Parlatore, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. President Trump's former criminal attorney worked on this case, represented Trump until he resigned, Mr. Parlatore, in May. Very interesting to hear that. Interesting to hear the words from the US president too. It's very noisy outside the Miami courthouse, but let's head to Doral, which is where the president has just left before arriving here, now in the building behind me. Mark Stone managed to grab a word with the president. Mark, bring us up to date.
Anna, good afternoon from Doral, President Trump's golf club, where he spent the night, where he spent the morning, where we spent the morning, and had the most extraordinary front row seat on this unprecedented day in American history. Within the last 20 minutes or so, the former president left here. Before getting into his motorcade outside the front reception of the golf club here, he spent a few moments talking to the staff. I shouted a question at him, asked him how he was feeling, why he had nuclear secrets in his possession. He ignored those questions, but a few moments later, my colleague Eleanor Dealey asked again how he was feeling. One word he replied with, great. Have a listen.
President Trump, how are you feeling?
Have seen of the former president, because of course he has now gone into that underground car park outside the courthouse. We will not see him now until that court hearing is over. There are no cameras in court, and so that image there of the president leaving Doral about 20 minutes or so to the west of where you are is the image that we will see before he is in court in front of that magistrate, where he will hear the charges read out before him, where he will be arraigned, where he will enter a plea, presumably not guilty, and then we will find out what the bail conditions, the bond conditions are for the time going forward. Anna, as I said, we've spent the morning at his golf club, and I have to say it has been really very fascinating. A very strange energy in there through the morning as we saw the Secret Service agents that are always with every president, present and former.
You can always tell a Secret Service agent by the bulge on the side of their waist and by the earpiece in their ear, buzzing around the resort. We expected maybe that Donald Trump would come out for a round of golf. Last week up in Bedminster, he did just that. He was out playing golf at the point at which that extraordinary indictment was released. Not today, though. No golf for him today. Instead, he was inside one of the villas that makes up this sprawling complex behind me. But we did see his son, Eric, a few times. I saw Eric having breakfast with a team of people, wandering around as well, speaking to some of the staff in the merchandise shop, where everything, as you might imagine, is branded Trump. And those Make America Great Again hats very much prominently on sale. And then we saw his lawyers too, a team of lawyers. You were talking to a former lawyer a moment ago. Well, his team of lawyers, the current lawyers, I have to say, they all looked pretty relaxed as they prepared for this extraordinary day in court.
Mark Stone, thank you very much indeed. It is just after 7 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in Miami, where Donald Trump has embarked on a journey no former US president has ever made before. What faces Mr. Trump in the courthouse here, a 37-count federal indictment, extremely serious charges for him. He has now arrived at the courthouse here in Miami, the Wilkie D. Ferguson U.S. Courthouse in the Southern District of Florida. What marks this out is that these are federal charges. The story is that the allegation is that he took documents from the White House that were the property of the Archives Office. Despite repeated calls, he did not return them. The suggestion is then that he hid them and he moved them and he's lied about them and he got his attorney to lie about them. Here outside the court, it is febrile. There are supporters and opponents of Donald Trump. As you can see, this top picture there. We are waiting for the court action to happen because Donald Trump will have to be fingerprinted. A picture will be used. We understand a mugshot will not be taken for him, and he will be formally arrested. But let's get the atmosphere outside court, shall we? Very noisy down here. Our international correspondent, John Sparks, has been soaking up the atmosphere. John?
Yeah, hi. Very, very noisy, very lively, very colourful here in the plaza in front of the Wilkie D. Ferguson Courthouse building. What I can tell you is that the pro-Trump supporters here, they know that Donald Trump is now in the building. They know that he is heading to courtroom 13-3, and they have, for the most part, assembled at the entrance to this building, where there is a police barricade with some yellow police tape. There is a large police presence, but it's not what you would describe as heavy. Police officers with bicycles, some vehicles, which is surprising from my point of view. It is a very fluid situation. You've got pro-Trump supporters, some anti-Trump supporters as well, and members of the media from all over the United States. They certainly have been getting a barracking from many of these supporters who accuse them of being all about fake news, members of the liberal and left establishment. So very, very lively here indeed. People are a combination of angry, you can see the signs, I stand with Trump, angry that he is here, angry that he is being indicted. And there also is, I have to say, sort of a festive mood as well. They are here, they're together, they've assembled, they share the same view. Okay. Yeah. Okay, they're being accused of telling lies, member of the fake news media. Certainly heard a lot of that. I should just say, you may hear bad language, just warn you in advance. Certainly heard some of that in advance. But a lot of people here, I'd say several hundred, not the thousands or even the tens of thousands that had been predicted by some. Several hundred, though, committed Donald Trump supporters, his core support, his base support. They think a terrible injustice is being done. They think that the Department of Justice, Joe Biden's administration, are weaponizing the justice system to take out their main competitor, their main challenger in the next election. For them, you agree with me, ma'am? That's what you think, yeah, okay. That's what they think, that's what they're saying, and they've got a position, they've got a platform to say that. Very loud, very lively, and a mixture of anger and fellowship. That's probably the right way to describe it, fellowship. A lot of people here traveled long distances. We know some people traveled in buses this morning from all over Florida. And it is something of an act of endurance to be here. It is very, very hot. People drinking water. But a lot of people here, very loud, very lively. People here, they want Donald Trump to see them. They want Donald Trump to hear them. They've been saying, we want Trump, we want Trump. They want Donald Trump to hear him. It's the people chanting, sometimes with bad language. Down with the Biden dictatorship, they cry. Down with the Biden dictatorship. Yeah. It's some similarities with a football crowd. Yeah, some bad language as well. I've heard that. But let's go back a bit. One of the interesting things here is that you can see the American media are positioned in tents right next to the court. And what they have found in some cases is that the Trump supporters have come in, interrupted the broadcasters, told media personalities exactly what they think of them. And it is very fluid. I've never personally seen anything like it. There are no segregated areas. There's no press pen for members of the media. Everybody is in here together. But I have to say, so far, there haven't been any problems. No major problems. I haven't seen the police make any arrests. For the most part, pretty good-natured so far. I expect they'll be here for the next couple of hours. They have the nation's media here. They have their attention. People have got something to say. Hello, there's Blacks for Trump 2020. Lots of clubs here, organizations, people who support Trump, religious organizations, evangelical Christians, people with banners, leaflets. Thank you very much. There we go. So lively scenes, loud scenes. Expect this to continue for the next couple of hours.
In the house already.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. John Sparks, thank you very much indeed. Well, with me throughout the evening is the former US federal prosecutor for this district in southern Florida, Alex Soto. I mean, this is your courthouse, right? Have you ever seen anything like this?
Well, first, I wouldn't describe this as my courthouse, but I appreciate the comment. I practiced here for many years, tried many cases here. Have never seen anything close to this at all. But of course, this is unprecedented.
Unprecedented. Rare to see a man with the head of a pig on a stick with the US Stars and Stripes flag hanging out of its mouth as well.
America first!
America First shouting behind us as well. I mean, it's febrile, isn't it? Let's be honest about you. And there is no separation between these different groups of people. You know, do you think the light touch here, would that be typical for, you know, the local police and for the county police here in Miami?
Well, I'm sure they're taking whatever measures are necessary, but this is exactly what Donald Trump wants to see. When you ask about why he's making these public statements, sure, he's making those statements to the folks who might contribute financially to his voters, but he's also making those statements. He's playing to a jury pool. We're going to draw from this area for his jury pool.
So his jury is not the future trial jury, it's the jury of the US population. Is that how you see this?
Well, it's the jury of this community. His jury is going to be drawn from this community, from the citizens of likely Miami-Dade County, if not West Palm Beach. And in either case, he got 40 to 50% of the vote here. So that means 4 or 5 of the 12 individuals who sit on his jury are likely to be his former supporters.
Yeah,
that
that's
matters.
interesting. I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? You know, the light touch from the jury, because, you know, the support for him here. But let's talk about what happens today. He arrived at about 10:02. He needs to be arrested. He needs to be booked. Talk us through the events of today inside the courthouse.
Well, he needs to be processed. Typically, a defendant who's going through the process is going to be fingerprinted. It's going to be photographed. He's going to provide some information. He's going to meet with pretrial services. I think the president is going to be doing some of that, not all of that. Some special accommodations have been made for him. My understanding is that the fingerprinting process is going to be by scan as opposed to the ink. I don't believe a photograph or a mugshot is going to be taken of him. It's probably not necessary given who he is and that we all kind of know who he is. But that is the administrative sort of process that he has to go through before he sees the judge.
Yes, we understand an existing photograph will be used of him.
Yes.
You know, the idea of a mugshot being released, you know, that's an interesting concept, is it not? So that's all being avoided. And then what happens in the actual case itself? The idea of an arraignment is to allow the defendant to understand the charges against them. We know there's 38 in total, 37 directed at Donald Trump, 1 at the co-defendant, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Will all of those charges be read out to the former president?
No, they likely will not. His attorney will likely speak on his behalf and advise the judge, Magistrate Judge Jonathan Goodman, that he's waiving reading of the indictment. He will enter a plea of not guilty. He'll ask for the court to enter something called the Standing Discovery Order, which spells out the responsibilities of both the government and the defense to produce documents, more so on the government, obviously, because the government possesses the documents necessary to prosecute him. So, and he will request a trial by jury. That's all.
Okay, just to interrupt you, apologies. So a trial by jury will be part of his request.
Yes.
Trump has now been processed, we understand. You've just talked about that, ahead of this arraignment. And Trump and his co-defendant, Walt Notter, has also been booked. Is that the arrest process? Just explain if you can.
Yes, booking is akin or synonymous with arresting, or the arrest process that I just described earlier.
Let's just talk about the co-defendant then, shall we, which is count 38, if you like. And the point about that is that part of the charges are a conspiracy. Is it also that this valet, this right-hand man to Donald Trump, is just very loyal? I mean, surely the prosecutors would have tried to turn him, wouldn't they?
Well, he only surrounds himself with people who are loyal, including his lawyers, who are willing to sometimes do his bidding, crossing the threshold into violating the law, allegedly. And so it's not surprising that he has those people surrounding him. It's not surprising to me that, as alleged in the indictment, Mr. Nauta did some of these things, which is to move boxes, conceal them, do the president's bidding. I think it was an interesting choice by the government to charge Mr. Nauta, who's much more likely to plead guilty and perhaps cooperate against the former president than obviously Mr. Trump would be to plead guilty and admit anything.
Well, certainly we know that Walt Nauta travelled with the president over the weekend at the 2 rallies that he had. We know also that his attorneys were with him today, leaving Doral. We've got some exclusive picture of him doing so, getting into that motorcade. Let's take a look at those pictures then from a short time ago. It's his golf resort complex, established in the 1960s. Let's just look at these if we can. Yeah, he said he was doing great to that question. His son, Eric Trump, who's alongside him too, also said his dad was doing great. But quite frankly, Alex, he has said he doesn't want to be indicted. Nobody wants to be indicted, he said in a weekend interview. And also in a rally, he said, in a slightly sick way, I don't mind this. The small dollar donations are up. My poll numbers are up. So politically, everybody will be watching to see what impact this has.
These things typically don't have a negative impact on his poll numbers, amazingly. He's been through quite a bit. He's been twice impeached. He's been indicted already once in New York. He's under investigation for yet another indictment in Georgia for improperly influencing the election results there. And his numbers among his supporters don't seem to dwindle. And so I think part of his strategy, if not his defense team's strategy, is to maintain that stiff upper lip, to look as though he's not concerned because he's not guilty.
And given this is election year, as we continue to watch these pictures from Doral, As I said, no time to play golf. There are 4 championship courses here at Doral. It's another one of those Trump resorts just west of the airport. These are exclusive pictures from Sky News, shot a short time ago before he made his way to the courthouse, where he has just been processed and booked. All Trump supporters going past me here. Much of the support today has come via vehicles. They're driving round and round the courthouse with flags and making their views known to everybody around, as you can hear. There you can hear another one with a megaphone, "Free Donald Trump," behind us. He is free, of course. He's made his way to this courthouse, setting off with his security detail, Secret Service, of course, for life, for former presidents. Chatting in the back of that vehicle, no doubt lots to talk about. The latest pictures, as you can see from outside the court, lots of concern expressed by people about the security and the safety here. There is no segregation of pro and anti. There is no segregation from the world's media who are here to report on this historic case. Let's just bring you the very latest from the courthouse. Donald Trump and his co-defendant, his valet, Walt Nauta, have now been booked and processed. But what about the events that led up to this? Well, the events which have led to Donald Trump's appearance in court today began back in January 2021, when he left the White House following the election of Joe Biden. The case centers around a large cache of classified documents which were moved from Washington to Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida once he left office. You see the pictures there. That is the white and gold ballroom. There were so many boxes of files. They were originally piled onto a stage in one of the 2 ballrooms at Mar-a-Lago before some were moved to a business center at the resort. Well, the indictment includes an image of boxes being stacked up in a bathroom, many next to the toilet, before they were eventually moved to what was described as a highly accessible storage room. The suggestion is that the storage room led through doors to the pool patio area, which is where events took place. Where security are concerned, the National Archives asked Mr. Trump to turn over any presidential records still in his possession. Well, some highly classified documents were returned, but in February 2022, the National Archive called in the Department of Justice. A grand jury then ordered Trump to hand over all classified material still in his possession, and federal agents visited Mar-a-Lago, where they collected 38 more documents. So 197 handed over originally, 38 more than handed over. Those are the numbers so far. A further search of Mar-a-Lago by the FBI led to the discovery of 27 more boxes containing a total of 11 sets of classified documents. By this point, the Justice Department suspected Trump of violating 3 federal laws, including the Espionage Act. Donald Trump has always maintained his innocence, describing the investigation as a witch hunt. But finally, last Thursday, a grand jury here in Miami issued the indictment, which led to the scheduling of today's federal court appearance. It's been a complicated and long process, and as many people have said, if he had just listened to his lawyers and handed over the documents, we would not be here today. Well, let's just talk in more detail about that raid that we saw back in August last year, the FBI raid. You might remember the pictures in the darkness. 33 boxes were then found, and there's different gradings of classified documents. In those boxes, they found 31 confidential documents. This is going up the scale of classification, 54 secret documents, and then 18 top secret documents. Now, it's only those documents found in August that are relevant to this case, 31 of which make counts 1 to 31 in the indictment. Alex, how did they come by choosing 31 documents? Will they have been carefully chosen?
They would have been carefully chosen. One of the more interesting aspects of this case is the Classified Information Protection Act, which essentially is a balancing act between the defendant's right to defend himself, to have access to documents necessary to defend himself, and the government's interest in securing important secret documents. One clarification, the statute that he's charged as violating, the Espionage Act under Section 93, doesn't actually say classified documents. It references documents related to the national defense, which is typically defined as documents that have been closely held, meaning that have not been publicly disclosed, and documents that could potentially damage the interest of the national security of the United States, and that's actually alleged in paragraph 3 of the indictment.
For example, would it be foreign nations where America was active militarily and are now no longer, like Afghanistan, for example? Would that be something they feel they could present in court? And other more sensitive areas, like Iran, they would find they could not?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a case-by-case basis, but I think one of the more important key words, rather, in that statute is that the government needs to prove that these documents could potentially cause damage to the United States. They don't have to prove that they actually would have or have. And so I think that's an important distinction to make, and I think those issues are going to be litigated.
Many people talk about, well, Joe Biden took documents. He took documents as a senator. He took documents as vice president. They found them in his think tank office in Washington. They found it at his home in Delaware. What's the difference then?
The difference is that when he was made aware of the fact that he was in possession of these documents, he turned them over, whereas Donald Trump allegedly willfully retained them. That is the statute that he violated, is willful retention of national defense information.
And we talked earlier with Tim Parlatore, one of his lawyers who's just resigned, about the fact that he drew his attorneys into this. Now, much of the evidence we saw in that indictment is the fact that Trump, got his lawyer, his attorney, to effectively lie for him, and that his co-defendant, the valet, was seen moving boxes to get it away from the attorney, who was searching Mar-a-Lago to find these documents to hand them over to the FBI. Now, as a lawyer yourself, what do you think of that allegation?
I think that the cover-up is always more damning to any accused than the substantive violation. Obviously, typically the innocent don't conceal evidence from the government if they don't feel like they've done anything wrong, and I think that gives you insight into the defendant's mind, and at least that's what the government is going to be arguing.
And the whole point about the president, Joe Biden, is that a special counsel was also set up in that case, and that case is ongoing. So in a sense, many people are talking about fairness and the weaponization of the Department of Justice. Both are being treated equally, this former and current US president.
Right, and again, that's more of a political question than a legal one for him. One of the steps that's going to be taken pre-trial is that each of the parties are going to file something called motions in limine, motions pre-trial, to deal with questions of evidence, evidentiary issues. And I suspect the defense is going to make this sort of argument. Other people have done this. This is selective prosecution, generally whataboutism, and it's unfair to prosecute me. But that essentially is requesting that the jury nullify, that they not find him guilty despite the evidence, which is typically improper. So I think the government is going to move to exclude those kinds of arguments.
Okay, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Specifically, some of the conversations with his attorney, they've already gone to court about the inclusion of that, haven't they? So it was in May last year that Donald Trump met his two attorneys. And what has now been revealed in this indictment is some of the conversations that were had. The suggestion is that as a client, you should be able to ask your lawyer questions that are then not repeated. I'm going to read out some of the questions that Donald Trump asked his lawyer. "I don't want anybody looking through my boxes," he's supposed to have said in May last year. "What happens if we just don't respond or don't play ball with them? Wouldn't it be better if we just told them we don't have any documents? Isn't it better if there are no documents?" Now, do you think that should be admissible? These are private client-attorney conversations which have now been included in this federal indictment.
Right, so I think there are two questions here. First is whether that information should have been disclosed or communicated from the attorney to anyone outside that relationship. And based on the crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege, the government's position, and I believe a court has already ruled on this because we're seeing these statements in the indictment, that there was a proper exception found to the attorney-client privilege, and there are important public policy reasons for that.
Alex, it's hard to hear yourself think, isn't it, with some of these vehicles going past. They're blaring out their music, their messages, and obviously they're tooting their horns as you watch these pictures outside the court. In a sort of hiatus, waiting to hear more from the court. In the meantime, let's bring in somebody who worked alongside President Trump. Joining us from Washington, Hogan Gidley, former White House Deputy Press Secretary, who served under President Trump. Quite some scenes here in Miami. Just give us your reaction to what we're witnessing today.
Yeah, it is absolutely stunning to see what's unfolding in Miami. I've obviously been with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago before, Doral as well, and of course Bedminster. Well, he'll be going back tonight to have a speech and also a fundraiser. But you know, the support for Donald Trump runs deep on the Republican side. A lot in the middle support him as well. And what you're seeing is kind of the culmination of that support, some of the anger they see with the weaponization of the federal government, these three-letter agencies that continue to go after certain members of the political sphere that they deem, you know, different in some way, that hold the wrong positions, whether they like the wrong tweet or download the wrong podcast or support the wrong opinion. Those people are targeted by this government, and you're seeing a lot of people show up to support Donald Trump, who they feel obviously is wrongly targeted by the federal government at this point.
Well, why is it a weaponization of the Department of Justice? I mean, you've read the indictment. The allegation is that he held onto documents when he shouldn't have done and lied about it. He could have handed them back.
Well, I noticed in the previous segment, y'all were talking about Joe Biden. I think you made the call that, for example, Joe Biden is being treated the same. He isn't. I don't remember a raid into his house. I don't remember pictures of his documents leaked. I don't remember conversations about them being stored in multiple locations either. Not to mention the fact that two instances aren't the same. Donald Trump was the president of the United States. He had the ability, the authority to have these documents. Joe Biden never did, but he did it anyway, and he had them in a garage beside his car, a house where his son, Hunter Biden, who was all messed up on drugs at the time, had a problem with prostitution, who knows what else, was living at that particular property. Talk about unsecured documents. Not to mention the fact, to do with
this, to be fair.
He absolutely does, because you asked about the weaponization of government. And what I'm trying to point out to you is time and time again, these folks that hide behind these three-letter agencies come after the right side politically and do nothing to those on the left.
Okay, I suppose everybody looks at it and says, well, the difference is that President Biden, and indeed, let's bring in Trump's Vice President, Mike Pence, they handed those documents back. President Trump would not be here now if he had decided to listen to his attorneys and hand the documents back.
Well, that's a legal question that I don't know the answer to, but I can tell you just definitively on all sides, we understand neither Hillary Clinton, with 30,000 emails marked classified that James Comey clearly said were hacked and foreign governments actually saw those, Joe Biden's documents and Mike Pence's documents were not able to be kept by those individuals because they weren't the president of the United States. That is a huge difference here. Joe Biden can't keep those documents, neither could Mike Pence. So I'm glad they turned them over, but they didn't have the right to have them in the first place, whereas Donald Trump did. And that's the real legal argument here that I think we're going to see unfold over the next several weeks, is that his team, Donald Trump's, is going to argue he was the president. He had the right to have these documents, among other issues, of course.
But he wasn't the president. He was the ex-president. You know, even he posted the picture of all the boxes outside the White House waiting to be packed into a truck to head to Miami, suggesting, well, if this is espionage, we're not very good at it. He was an ex-president. He did not have the right to the documents. That's the archives people.
Two things there. One is you don't know what all is in those boxes. I'm sure they're not full of classified documents, as you're well aware. He keeps newspaper clippings. He keeps poll numbers. He keeps all kinds of things in those boxes. But second of all, when he left Washington, D.C. and landed at Mar-a-Lago, had those boxes in his possession, he was the president of the United States, not until Joe Biden was sworn in and took the oath of office. So in that time period, he most assuredly had the chance to declassify those documents. That's going to be an issue here as the attorneys try to argue that. But the fact is, Joe Biden was not president of the United States by the time Donald Trump had touched down in Mar-a-Lago. So a lot can happen on that 2-hour flight, no question about it. But the real difference here, of course, is that for whatever reason, the kid gloves are always out when you're talking about Democrats, and when it's Republicans, they try to throw the book at them, regardless of how flimsy and how ridiculous, whether it be the Russian hoax that wasn't true, whether it be 2 or 3 impeachments, whether it be lies about Lafayette Square here in Washington, D.C., and Trump moving people out of the way and all that stuff that wasn't true, Russian bounty gate. Time and time again, these government officials leak things about Republicans. Notice how they never release information about Democrats, and now we're finding out Joe Biden had a lot more problems than just keeping some classified documents.
Just want to ask you a question about the political ramifications of this. You know, when will the Republican Party find that Donald Trump brings with him too much toxic drama and he has a drag on the process? Already we see candidate Nikki Haley changing her tone, saying that if this is true, stuff in the indictment, then he was reckless with national security. You know, do you expect that point to come, that he is deemed a drag on the party?
Well, but someone else today, Vivek Ramaswamy, said, look, this is a political prosecution that's happened time and time again. Here I'm putting forth a letter, and I want all the other candidates to sign on to say if we're the nominee, we'll pardon Donald Trump. The fact is, Donald Trump's popularity spiked above 50+% one time in the last couple of years, and that was in August of last year. And what happened in August? That was the Mar-a-Lago raid. Turns out people get a little angry when they feel as though the politicization of these organizations and entities are weaponized and going after certain individuals. 76% of the people in this country believe this is a political prosecution. So it will most assuredly, for the time being, help him out in the primary because he's got a 40-point lead. What it does in the general is anybody's guess. But I can tell you the American people are pretty sick and tired of watching their government go after them for their political opinions. So we've got a long way to go until votes are starting to be cast in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. But I can assure you, as you guys well know, being in the news business, this will be the subject for just about every newscast from now until when the time those votes start.
It's because you're supporting a history-making president, obviously. So I'm shouting above the tooting of horns here. Very good to have you on. Thank you very much indeed for your time there. That was Hogan Gidley. Yes, history-making, as I said, twice impeached, twice indicted. History being made here. But heading back to London now for some breaking news. Kamali.
Thank you for that, Anna. Back to you shortly. But let me just bring a little breaking news coming into us here in Westminster in the past few minutes. The former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has issued a statement all about his evidence given to the Privileges Committee and the Privileges Committee report into whether or not he misled Parliament with his statements about what was happening during lockdown and whether or not Boris Johnson misled them when discussing his lockdown behaviour and the events that took place during the pandemic. Boris Johnson saying that the Privileges Committee should publish their report and let the world judge their nonsense, he says. He says they have no excuse for delay. Their absurdly unfair rules do not even allow any criticism of their findings. I have made my views clear to the committee in writing and will do so more widely when they finally publish. Boris Johnson there making it clear that he expects the Privileges Committee to publish their report as soon as possible. Of course, Boris Johnson quitting as an MP on Friday ahead of that Privileges Committee publishing its findings. Expectation was that Boris Johnson would have been sanctioned and would have perhaps been suspended from Parliament for more than 10 days, meaning that a by-election would have been triggered in his Uxbridge and South Ruislip constituency. Now, in relation to this, just in the past hour or so, or couple of hours rather, it was made clear that the Privileges Committee, who we thought were going to publish their reports tomorrow, said that they received a letter enclosing further representations from Mr Johnson was received by the committee at 11:57 p.m. last night. The committee is dealing with these and will report promptly. We're expecting the Privileges Committee to report in the next day or so. We're not exactly certain when, but...
American president is in court right now. He has been booked. And so is his co-defendant, Rolt Nader, both of them booked. The process has been got through. Let's bring in Ambassador John Bolton, former US National Security Advisor to Mr. Trump, former US Ambassador to the UN as well. Let's talk how serious this is, first of all. Ambassador, talk about the charges. Just how bad is this indictment?
Well, the allegations go directly to the heart of American national security, and the handling of these potentially very sensitive documents and the former president's refusal to return them to government control so they could be in secure locations represents something that challenges not only the administration of the laws intended to protect national security, but actually the obstructs the judicial system, the law enforcement system as well. So if it were any other U.S. official other than the president, I think they'd be in jail already. The question is whether Trump can run out the string here on this long enough until after the 2024 election, where quite possibly if he wins and is inaugurated, he could pardon himself.
Yes, and the suggestion is that if another Republican won, they would pardon him. Suggestion is possibly if Joe Biden wins, he might pardon him. It doesn't stop it being serious, and I know you called it a rifle shot. Others have called it a slam dunk. Is that how you see it?
Well, I think it's a very narrowly tailored indictment. This is not a case where the government threw everything in the kitchen sink at Donald Trump. They've really limited the charges, which means there could be other charges later. But I think it was intended to help expedite the processing of the case. We don't know what's happening in the courthouse. Sometimes in an arraignment, they simply take the defendant's plea and go through the arrest formalities, and that's it. In other arraignment hearings, sometimes they get right to very extensive discussions on scheduling. The special counsel, Jack Smith, said he was going to press for a speedy trial. I think that's the right thing to do. Whether the court will agree to that, what the process will be, we don't know. We may find out something in a few minutes whenever that hearing breaks up.
We haven't seen these classified documents that were in the possession of Donald Trump. You haven't seen these classified documents. We know some of them were deemed top secret. You know, what sort of things would they have included?
Well, I noticed in the list, in the indictment, that some of them are dated during the period I was at the White House, others either before or after. But I certainly know what kinds of documents we did show to Donald Trump. And as you might expect, since the president obviously makes the decisions at the very highest level on the most momentous questions, easier questions get decided before they get to the Oval Office. It was our responsibility to give him all the information he needed to understand what his options were, what the consequences might be, and to facilitate implementing whatever decision he made. So we provided him, certainly tried to provide him, with the most sensitive information that the United States government possessed so that he could have it all before him. And there was some extraordinarily sensitive material included in that over the period of his 4 years in the White House. Whatever these documents are, for whatever reason he might have taken them, if they were to have fallen into the hands of American adversaries, the consequences could have been disastrous. I think that's why this is a strong case, although it's a complication for the prosecution, how much of this they're going to unclassify so that the jury can see it. And that may be another aspect of the case that they're discussing in the hearing now. Certainly they're going to have to discuss it at some point.
Yes, and certainly as part of the indictment, the allegation is that Mar-a-Lago was not a secure location. Some 10,000 guests and members went through that property during this time. 150 members of staff worked there. 150 different events were held there. But let's talk about motive if we can. You know, why did Donald Trump have these documents? Chris Christie, himself a candidate for the Republican nomination, said overnight he couldn't bear the fact that he'd lost to Joe Biden. He still wanted the trappings of president, and one of the trappings are these secret documents. Is that how you see it?
Well, I'm not a shrink. I don't know what Trump's motives were. I think it could be as simple as he thinks it's cool to have classified documents. It's an example of I've got something and you don't. Whether there were more nefarious motives involved, I don't know. I would say motive is not critical to a verdict here. It might be helpful to the prosecution. But whether Trump had a good reason or a bad reason or no reason at all, he shouldn't have had these documents after leaving the White House. And when the return of the documents was demanded of him by the government, the law is very clear that he has to give them back, which he refused to do, and in fact, effectively caused his attorneys to lie about. So, as I say, whatever the motivation, I think he's in real jeopardy legally here. And we'll see what witnesses the prosecution may have. While the indictment is quite extensive, that's certainly not all of the evidence the government will present.
Ambassador, I know you have to go. I just want to squeeze one final question in. You know, you sit there thinking, well, maybe he just didn't understand the classification of these documents. And yet there he was for the 2016 election, you know, basing many of his arguments about lock her up, about Hillary Clinton, about emails and classifications to do with her.
Well, look, he has gotten away with a lot in his life. And I think in many respects, he thinks he's bulletproof and that he can do what he wants. And his record over many, many years, unfortunately, tends to prove he can do what he wants and not bear the consequences. We'll see if his luck has run out now.
Ambassador John Bolton, former National Security Advisor to the Trump administration, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So we talked there about the use of classified documents, didn't we? It was a topic that Donald Trump referred to both during his time in the White House and during his election campaign in 2016, as I mentioned to the ambassador there. Indeed, some of the indictments he's facing today include examples where he has spoken publicly about the illegal leaking of classified information. Let's listen.
The first thing I thought of when I heard about it is, how does the press get this information that's classified? How do they do it? You know why? Because it's an illegal process, and the press should be ashamed of themselves. But more importantly, the people that gave out the information to the press should be ashamed of themselves, really ashamed.
We also need the best protection of classified information.
No, I know, but who is she? Well, now we can hear actually from one of Trump's lawyers. Let's have a look at Alina Haber.
Today is not about President Donald J. Trump, who is defiant. It is not about the Republican Party. It is not about the 2024 election. It is about the destruction of the long-standing American principles that have set this country apart for so long. In recent years, we have seen the rise of politically motivated prosecutors who don't care for impartiality, who don't care for due process or equal protection of laws. They have been quietly but aggressively cultivating a two-tiered system of justice where selective treatment is the norm. From the Russia hoax to the attorney generals, to the corrupt DAs in Georgia and New York, and now this. The people in charge of this country do not love America. They hate Donald Trump. What we are witnessing today is the blatant and unapologetic weaponization of the criminal justice system. The Biden-appointed special counsel has sought fit to bring 37 federal charges against President Trump, the leading frontrunner, less than a year and a half before an election. Countless other individuals, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden himself, retained possession of classified documents, yet have not been prosecuted. And none of them came into possession of those documents while they were president. None of them were president who, as the head and sole member of the executive branch, has the power to summarily declassify documents. The decision to pursue charges against President Trump while turning a blind eye to others is emblematic of the corruption that we have here. We are at a turning point in our nation's history. The targeting, prosecution of a leading political opponent is the type of thing you see in dictatorships like Cuba and Venezuela. It is commonplace there for rival candidates to be prosecuted, persecuted, and put into jail. What is being done to the President Trump should terrify all citizens of this country. These are not the ideals that our democracy is founded upon. And this is not our America. Thank you.
So what's happening right now inside the courthouse? Has he been arrested? Has he been fingerprinted? Has a mugshot been taken? Walk us through what's happening here now.
President Trump is in a very unique position where he doesn't need to be given a mugshot, obviously. He is not a flight risk. He is the leading candidate of the GOP at the moment. He is going through a process that has been coordinated with Secret Service, and it will all be handled seamlessly.
And thank you, guys. The attorneys, what is his state of mind? Just real quick, how is he feeling?
He's defiant.
So Alina Haber there, one of Donald Trump's lawyers, coming to speak outside to the international media who are gathered in great number at the courthouse in downtown Miami. She said this was a blatant and unapologetic weaponization of the criminal justice system and the targeting of a political opponent. And also, as we heard there, no mugshot for the president because he's not a flight risk. It is our understanding that he has now entered the courtroom. 13-3 for arraignment. It is on the 13th floor. It is one of the biggest here. And there is an overspill room as well for some 200 people to watch on. Such is the interest. So Donald Trump is in the courthouse. Let's bring in our US correspondent, Mark Stone. He's been at Doral. Managed to see Donald Trump yourself this morning. The word is, we're great, right?
Yes, what a spectacle this is, what a spectacle it was this morning. You know, we often hear that phrase, a front row seat for history. Well, that really was, you know, outside inside his golf club. We spent the morning there. I saw Eric Trump, his son, walking around, talking to staff there. If you've never been to a Trump hotel or a Trump resort, everything is branded Trump. From the water bottles to the wine, it's all Trump. And Eric was there walking around, and the lawyer that we have just seen expressing such a remarkable view. She was there this morning as well, walking around, all of Donald Trump's staff there, and then the president himself emerged from one of the villas. I asked him first whether or not why in fact he had nuclear secrets in his villa in Mar-a-Lago, just north of here from where we are. No answer to that. But then my colleague, Eleanor Dealey, said to him, how are you feeling? One word, great. And with that, he got in that convoy and drove the 20 minutes or so here to the downtown courtroom for this moment of history. I was struck by one of the points that the lawyer made there. She said it is the decision to pursue charges against President Trump while turning a blind eye to others is emblematic of the corruption we have here. We are at a turning point in our nation's history. Incredible language that many in America will find deeply disturbing, many others will absolutely agree with. It drives a wedge in society. The intention is to drive a wedge in society, and it shows just how divided this country is. I spoke yesterday afternoon to a lawyer who has the perspective of history, because he was a lawyer who was about to prosecute President Nixon for Watergate, a prosecution, of course, that never happened because the president who followed Nixon, Ford, he pardoned Nixon. But that lawyer understands history. He said that the judicial system in America is on trial right now. Incidentally, he's a lawyer who turned down Donald Trump's request to represent him. There are many lawyers here in Miami who have been asked by Donald Trump to represent him. Many of them have said no. Remarkable stuff here. I've only just arrived, and I'm just looking at those gathered here. I mean, quite a lot of Trump supporters. I've seen someone with a banner saying "Lock him up" as well. This is reflective of American society. and society, you know, American society, right around this nation, everyone is watching this, but views are very polarized.
Oh, there's arguments on every corner,
Yeah.
because everybody's milling about, aren't they? But what impact does this have in terms of that perpetual division that we've seen in America since that first Trump campaign in 2016? For example, Illinois has become the first state to outlaw the banning of books. We're at the stage of banning books now here in the States. You know, Joe Biden's looking into that. You know, it's become so polarized, hasn't it, the States?
It has. I think it's getting deeper and deeper, but there are times at which you don't necessarily notice it. The midterm elections were last year. Just prior to that moment, I got the sense that maybe Trumpism was losing its steam because Donald Trump didn't do very well. In fact, last few months, we have seen that he is, no question, the front-runner for the Republican nomination for the White House. The man who has now been arraigned, voluntarily entered a plea of not guilty. We presume that will be happening any time now. He's been arrested. That is a fact. It's happened. And yet he is the front-runner for the Republican nomination. I think it's really important to see what will happen in the next few days and weeks. Will those others at the top of the Republican Party, the old guard of the Republican Party on Capitol Hill, will they stick with him? Will they stick with the narrative that we've heard played out in court here by his lawyers? Or will they split? Will they perhaps agree with the narrative that there appears in their eyes to be a two-tier justice system, but peel themselves away from Trump, try and find another candidate because they feel that what Trump has now alleged to have done is simply untenable for a presumptive candidate? We'll see how that plays out. I was struck by Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, Republican, top Republican, just before just as the arraignment came out. He was very critical of the justice system, backing Donald Trump. He's been quite quiet recently. Nikki Haley, another candidate, critical of Trump. We'll see if they peel away from Donald Trump. Right now, though, what a spectacle.
Absolutely. We'll listen for the Republican voices, listen to the poll numbers as well.
They're high. The poll numbers are huge. It's
I know,
quite
and they went up after he was found liable of sexual abuse, of E. Jean Carroll and defamation. So we'll watch those as well. But certainly Florida, it's been seen as a safe haven for Donald Trump. It's a place, of course, that he's made his home, Mar-a-Lago. So Sky's John Sparks has been out there finding out what people here in this state make of Donald Trump.
There are places in Miami where people go to let their hair down. Acts of escape when confrontation comes to town. But the prosecution of Donald Trump won't change their world.
You can just look at the past couple of years. Nothing changed people's, you know. So why would this be any different?
I'm happy that he is actually being indicted for crimes he probably committed.
Okay.
I mean, there's evidence he committed them, so I just didn't think it was ever going to happen.
The prosecution of the former president has shocked many in Florida. The state votes Republican, and it votes for Donald Trump. And there are those who think the government is out to get him. But on Ocean Drive, people see things in a different way. At the world-famous Palace drag show, people say the former president doesn't speak to and hasn't spoken up for them.
What do you make of Donald Trump?
To be honest with you, I don't see him.
You don't see him?
I don't. I don't. Unfortunately, like we have someone that is against our community, and as you could see, we are not hurting anybody. And we are about love, and we are about acceptance, and we just want to be here and live life the way that everybody wants to live their lives fully.
90 minutes up the road, we found different performers on a very different stage. This event hosted by Club 47, part of Donald Trump's so-called base. And the featured speaker, aspiring office holder, Carrie Lake.
Trump is a warrior, a warrior. He's Godzilla, and they're just little tiny geckos running around.
Trump's indictment, the product of Joe Biden's fearful regime, she said, and we didn't see anyone objecting.
I love you, Donald J. Trump.
I wonder what people will think when they see boxes of government records in the storage room, his shower room, his bedroom, other rooms. It doesn't play well, does it?
Well, I think it doesn't play well for Joe Biden either, who has him in his garage.
If the former president's made mistakes, the Democrats have done worse. And the Republicans of Florida, well, they have a nation to save. John Sparks, Sky News, Miami Beach.
Well, it's just coming up to 8 o'clock in the UK, 3 o'clock in the afternoon here in Miami. Donald Trump is in the courthouse right now, and the arraignment has begun. The 45th American president in a federal court right now, accused of taking classified documents, storing them, hiding them, and lying about them. A federal action which began with an FBI investigation, led to a grand jury being set up and a special counsel who released a 49-page indictment last Thursday against the US president and a co-defendant, his valet. Outside the court, as you can see, pro-Trump supporters have gathered, anti-Trump supporters have gathered, the world's media have gathered for this historic moment, the first time a former president has appeared in a federal courthouse, the first time any candidate for a political party, in fact, a leading political candidate for a US election run has appeared. Alex Soto is here with me, former federal prosecutor in this southern district of Florida. You be our eyes and ears, not allowed cameras in. Talk us through what will be happening right now, Alex.
Well, that's correct. No cameras are allowed in the federal courthouse. Unlike the state courthouse, the federal court has rules about permitting any cameras inside. So we're going to get a report after it's all over. And what's happening right now is that former President Trump is standing next to his lawyers and probably listening to Magistrate Judge Jonathan Goodman explain the charges against him, which astoundingly include violations of the Espionage Act, willfully retaining documents that are potentially damaging to the United States. It's an amazing thing to say out loud. And conspiracy to obstruct the United States in its investigation and its FBI investigation and grand jury investigation. This is someone who was sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, defend it, and is asking for that job again. So these are just amazing allegations to lodge against somebody in that position.
And if you read the indictment, it is quite clear, is it not, that the president had plenty of opportunity to return these documents. In fact, he did. Last January, 197 classification documents were handed back in 15 boxes, 14 of which contained classified material. Just hearing, actually, he's pled not guilty, so a plea has been entered. He has pleaded not guilty. I presume that comes as no surprise to you, Alex Soto.
It doesn't. It also triggers the Speedy Trial Act as soon as he's arraigned.
So explain the Speedy Trials Act, because certainly the special counsel on this said he wanted to seek a speedy trial, which has real implications for the American election, of course.
Right, yeah. There's a constitutional right to a speedy trial, and also that speedy trial requirement, right is codified in statute, and essentially sets forth certain periods of time within which certain steps need to happen in the criminal process. And so from now to the point of his trial, we have 70 days. In the absence of some sort of exclusion, which can be anything from a motion filed by the defense to something required by defense counsel, as long as the court finds that the ends of justice are met in excluding that time, it can just continue to get expanded.
Okay, Alex Soto, stay there. Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty to the charges contained in that indictment. Let us take you to John Sparks. He's at the back of the court where we're expecting to see this president. Remember, this hearing won't be long. John, paint the picture for us.
Okay, yeah, we're back. We're at the back of the main court complex. Let's have a quick look. They've just moved several dozen police back here. You can see some of the officers, police SUVs, Secret Service cars, Secret Service agents, motorcycle riders as well. A lot of activity here in the last, say, 10 minutes. Probably preparing now for Donald Trump's departure from the courthouse. And here you can see what they've done to protect the courthouse. Got Donald Trump supporters here from different groups, different clubs.
One group, you tell the truth, prostitutes.
Okay, they say they're all from one group. They're from one group. They all stand together. You see, they protected the courthouse with this strip of yellow plastic. And what we've seen is several hundred, I would say, several hundred pro-Trump supporters, a few anti-Trump protesters as well. Not the thousands or tens of thousands that some people predicted. Let's go this way, shall we? Let's go and have a look. But they are standing right the way around this very large court complex. You can see people with banners and signs. I stand with Trump, believe in Trump. Here we are. People are here partly because there is shade here and it is a excruciatingly hot day. Some people here wilting in the sun. They're also here because they're hoping to get a view of the Trump cavalcade, about a 10-vehicle cavalcade. He will leave here, I would assume, in the next 20 to 30 minutes. They're certainly making initial preparations now. Large crowd here, really unprecedented scenes in Miami here. And there were security concerns. There were real security concerns, particularly if pro-Donald Trump supporters clashed with anti-Donald Trump supporters. They have a conceal and carry gun license law in Florida. That means that people can, with a permit, they can carry weapons as long as they conceal them. It's a fact of life in many US cities, but it does make things unpredictable. And tensions have been running high here. The rhetoric has been highly charged, directed by Donald Trump himself. And he's been doing that through the day today, calling the indictment a witch hunt. We're very highly charged. How are you, madam? Are you holding up in the sun? No, you don't want to speak to us. Okay. You probably want to catch Donald Trump. You want to see him? Yeah, okay. Anyway, lively scenes here, lacking some of the intensity that we saw a few hours ago. It's very hot. I think people are getting tired, but now a lot of the supporters, they want to see Donald Trump on his way out of the court complex. Back to you, Anna.
Yeah, John, stay there if you don't mind. We've seen Donald Trump already. He's obviously in the courthouse here in downtown Miami. He overnighted, though, at his golf resort, Doral, which is just west of Miami International Airport. And there, we caught up with him here on Sky News. Here's our exclusive pictures. Yes, a wave to the people there. Obviously, people are staying at this resort. It was open last night. We'd seen him earlier having dinner alongside his attorneys, his lawyers, and his son, Eric, who was there. Sky News also caught up with Eric Trump earlier, who said he was great, shouted a question. How are you doing, Mr. Trump, from our producer? We're great, he said, as he made his way to the courthouse. But certainly, he had to find a local lawyer. That was not necessarily easy. He had a couple of lawyers quit last week who'd been working on this case. Mr. Trump, then, as you can see outside his Doral golf resort set up in the 1960s, 4 championship courses, certainly no time to play golf for him, despite that's what he did last week when he was at Bedminster, when the indictment was finally released last Thursday. Now, though, he is in court, court 13-3, 13th floor of this Miami courthouse. He has just pled not guilty to 37 counts against him in this federal case. John Sparks is still outside the court. It's been an extraordinary atmosphere, John Sparks, is it not? Of pro and anti-Trump supporters, people coming out to get their voice heard. You know, it once again underlines how divisive American politics is right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It has been a bit of a circus. Hundreds of pro-Trump supporters here surrounding the court complex in central Miami. Not just pro-Trump supporters, some anti-Trump supporters and members of the US media. You can see we are behind the main complex here, but you can see a media tent here, and that has allowed Trump supporters to go in and barrack, to criticize, to shout at
pundits, media commentators that they do not like. They've also got an extraordinary platform here to expand on their views about the last election being stolen, about how they believe Joe Biden is weaponizing the Department of Justice, how he is using it and the FBI to eliminate Donald Trump, his main challenger. I think that's fair to say, his main challenger in the next presidential election. Let's go this way. We're just waiting for Donald Trump to leave. As you say, courtroom 13-3, we believe Donald Trump has pleaded not guilty. Here you can see the extraordinary preparations that have been made for his departure. Dozens of Miami police SUV vehicles. The black vehicles, those are U.S. Secret Service vehicles that will be used in the Donald Trump convoy. We can see Secret Service agents as well. Just under the trees, there is an underground garage at some of the motorcycle riders here that will accompany the convoy, the cavalcade. And he will come out. There's an underground entrance under the court complex. He will come out of that. We presume he will travel this way, although, of course, they won't announce which way he will travel. He will then make his way to the airport, up to New Jersey, we believe, to his golf club, Bedminster in New Jersey. Let's just cross the road, shall we? You know, it's incredibly hot here. A lot of the people who've come to watch or participate are taking shelter now in the shade under this building here. Good camera crews as well. You can just see over here some Trump supporters. They're tired. It's been a long afternoon. People are dehydrated. But the fervor, the strength of their support, that certainly hasn't dimmed at all. Back to you, Anna.
Yeah, incredibly hot. John, thank you very much indeed. Let's just show you the scenes then outside the courthouse. This will be a short hearing in court 13-3. Donald Trump, as I said, pleaded not guilty already to those 37 charges. Court counts 1 to 31 are that Donald J. Trump willfully retained the documents and failed to deliver them. The list of documents and what they broadly pertain to are about White House intelligence briefings, the military activity of foreign countries, the nuclear capabilities of foreign countries and the United States, military attacks by a foreign country, communications with a foreign leader, the military contingency planning of the US, and so on. But the allegation, of course, comes from Trump's team that this case is the weaponization of the Department of Justice. Let's listen then to Donald Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba.
Today is not about President Donald J. Trump, who is defiant. It is not about the Republican Party. It is not about the 2024 election. It is about the destruction of the long-standing American principles that have set this country apart for so long. In recent years, we have seen the rise of politically motivated prosecutors who don't care for impartiality, who don't care for due process or equal protection of laws. They have been quietly but aggressively cultivating a two-tiered system of justice where selective treatment is the norm. From the Russia hoax to the attorney generals to the corrupt DAs in Georgia and New York, and now this. The people in charge of this country do not love America. They hate Donald Trump.
Okay. Yeah, Trump's lawyer there, Alina Habba, describing their view that this is a direct attack on a political opponent by Joe Biden's Department of Justice. Now, you might argue that there was separation by the establishment of a grand jury and a special counsel from the Department of Justice. But let's bring in former federal prosecutor Alex Soto. And let's take a step back. If they did not bring this case, what would it say to allies about the use in America of top secret classified documents, including Five Eyes members like the UK, for example?
Well, it would absolutely undermine their confidence in our ability to control documents that endanger and threaten their national security as well. And of course, part of our national security is our ability to coordinate with them, to learn from them some information that helps us, and we share that information. If that is cut off or mitigated in any way, it threatens really all of our allies.
The documents were handed over and retrieved in 3 different tranches. The first time, 197 documents were handed over by Donald Trump in 15 boxes, 14 of which contained classified information. The next time, 38 documents were handed over, and then after the FBI raid in August last year, 102 documents were taken. 337 documents with different classifications from confidential, secret to top secret, which grade from how grave, how serious, and how damaging it might be if they were in public hands. Now, part of the indictment is about how accessible Mar-a-Lago is. It is not a secure location. It's a members club. 150 different events took place during this time. Will that form a very important part, do you think, of this case?
It does, and the indictment makes clear, the allegations make clear through descriptions like documents being held in bathrooms, in halls where parties are held, in discussing the staff that isn't cleared, in discussing the visitors who aren't cleared to review these documents, to have possession of these documents, that these documents were exposed in a way that should never have happened. And in fact, the classification system of the documents that were recovered goes from confidential all the way to compartmented secret information. And even the lowest level confidential information, the definition is, if disclosed, could potentially damage the national security of the United States. So even the lowest level of those documents meets the requirement of that statute.
Will the trial, should it come, we've just had a not guilty plea, correct myself very quickly, a not guilty plea, so it looks like we're heading to trial. Is that like a definite now?
There are no definites, right, if we're looking into the future, but again, his habit is to never capitulate, never give up, never admit fault. And pleading guilty would require him to admit fault. So I don't see that happening.
So if we head to trial, the elements that will be looked into then, will they include motive about why he had the documents? Will it include intent about what he had to do with the documents? Because we've seen people like Chris Christie, former New Jersey governor, now standing himself, of course, to be a Republican candidate, saying this is vanity run amok. You know, he wanted the trappings of president. And as far as he's concerned, the trappings included these documents. Did it just make him feel special?
Right. So whether the government decides to put on evidence of motive is up to the government. It's not a requirement. It's not an element of the offense. But sometimes the government, through evidence of motive, will be able to prove intent. And in this case, the government need only prove that he knew he was in possession of documents that could potentially endanger the national security and willfully retained them after being asked to produce them. And the allegations of the indictment make clear that even before that request was made, he was going through the documents. Some of the communications between employee 1 and employee 2 in the indictment make clear that they're communicating, employee 2 is communicating with the president and saying he's reviewing these documents, he's going through these boxes, and that just persists for days before even the first request is made. So the allegations support his knowledge of those documents.
Well, I did wonder if that would, prove to be part of his defense, that he just needed more time to pull out of all his press cuttings something that had a top secret stamp at the top of it. I mean, could that be used, do you think, by the defense in this case?
Well, I think it's likely to be used. I don't know the efficacy of it. I think that Donald Trump's own words in the past with respect to the importance of classified information is going to make it very difficult for him to argue that he wasn't aware of the rules. It's hard. He'd be hard-pressed to argue that he was touting the importance of a rule that he didn't understand. And so that's made clear in the indictment as well. He understood the importance of these documents.
He has a co-defendant alongside him, doesn't he? His valet, his right-hand man, the man somebody described as the man who got him Diet Cokes, for example, somebody who's clearly proved themselves to be loyal. Walt Noddow. The question is, does he stay as part of Donald Trump's legal battle? Are they now connected? Will he pull himself off, have separate representation? Why is that important? Have they tried to turn him or flip him, if that's the right terminology, so that he also gives evidence in this federal action. So watching him will be an important part of this, I think, don't you?
I think it will be. Now, the government can't turn him, can't communicate with him. They can only communicate through his lawyer. Right now, because he's been indicted and arraigned, right now, they are at least putting forth a front that they are united. But his lawyer's duty is to him only, not to Donald Trump, regardless of who's paying that lawyer's fees. And we don't know who that is. His duty is to Waltine Nauta. And if the best thing for Mr. Nauta is to plead guilty, to cooperate, it is incumbent upon his lawyer to advise him of that, and for Mr. Nauta to do exactly that. We'll see how that plays out.
Alex Soto, it's fascinating, isn't it? How much longer will they be after a plea is entered? What else needs to be done in the court?
I believe that there is processing in terms of pretrial services. There may be a need for the conclusion of that conversation between Donald Trump's lawyers and pretrial services, but that's it. Once the arraignment is concluded, he should, I imagine that there was an agreement before the hearing took place between the government and Donald Trump's lawyers about his immediate release on a signature bond or a bond with certain conditions. So he should be leaving soon.
Well, that's the next thing we'll listen out for. What dollar price is set for that bond and what conditions? For example, will he have to give up his passport? Will he have to commit to having no other offence, state or federal, which might be difficult when he's waiting to hear what happens in Georgia and what happens to the 6th of January committee. We have more information to come, certainly. But certainly the use of classified documents was a topic Donald Trump referred to both during his time in the White House and during his original election campaign back in 2016. Indeed, some of the indictments he's facing today include examples where he has spoken publicly about the illegal leaking of classified information. Let's listen.
The first thing I thought of when I heard about it is, how does the press get this information that's classified? How do they do it? You know why? Because it's an illegal process, and the press should be ashamed of themselves. But more importantly, the people that gave out the information to the press should be ashamed of themselves, really ashamed.
We also need the best protection of classified information.
Donald Trump speaking earlier, and the very fact Donald Trump is planning to hold a fundraising event tonight in New Jersey, how he's not too tired to do it, I don't know, shows that actually these cases have not undermined his popularity among his core supporters as we head into the main part of the presidential election campaign of 2024. Remember, the first GOP debate comes towards the end of August, so not far off the main part of the body where the Republican Party has to choose its candidate. Well, let's bring in now Sean Spicer, who was both White House press secretary and communications director under Donald Trump. These are quite some scenes, aren't they, Mr. Spicer? What are you making of it all?
Well, look, I think it's a complicated process that we're witnessing right here. Obviously, the president has made it very clear that he believes this is a politically motivated situation, that others on the left have done similar things and not had any consequences brought against them. I think your analysis is right, though, that what has happened is he's galvanized many folks in the Republican Party, and it has not damaged his political standing, both in terms of the party, but more importantly, in terms of his national standing. I mean, the most recent polls that have come out from major media polling organizations show him, tied or beating Joe Biden in a general election, which I think is astonishing.
Why is that? I mean, the Lincoln Project, a group I'm sure you have nothing in common with, the anti-Trump Republicans, they say the base is like a cult. Is that how you see it?
No, I don't think so. And I think that just, I mean, look, those are a bunch of, look, I don't want to litigate that, but I think that they have proven over and over again that they don't really have a strong understanding of what's going on in the country or how to make an effective campaign against Trump. But the reality is that for many Americans, they believe that Donald Trump has been fighting for them and that the system is, as he puts it, rigged. And I think that's the misunderstanding that so many people have, especially folks on the left in this country, that for so many people who have, you know, for generations been told this is just how the system is going to be. For 4 years of President Trump, we saw somebody willing to fight the establishment and the system, if you will. And so they see this as an attack on him. And Trump, you know, talks about that, saying that they're going after me because they want to come after you, and I'm the guy standing in the way.
And Chris Christie, former New Jersey governor, did a town hall last night, said he's never cared about the American people. He only cares about himself. You've seen the psychology reports that say he is a narcissist. This is all about him. And in some respects, he said over the weekend as well, in some sick way, I quite enjoy this because I can expose them and because I get the poll numbers. I mean, he enjoys the attention, doesn't he?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, Trump enjoys the attention. I don't think even his fiercest critic or his greatest supporter would probably agree on that. But look, at the end of the day, the one thing that makes this campaign different is that Donald Trump was president for 4 years, and he did get results. He cut taxes. He restored relationships. He undid trade agreements that weren't working in the benefit of our workers. Over and over again, he supported the pro-life cause in a way that has never happened. And so for many conservatives, they look at what Trump has done, and it's not theoretical. It's very real. Here's a guy who came in and said he was going to do certain things and exceeded by far anybody's expectations as president of the United States. So I think that that's what makes this different. I mean, if Chris Christie, and I don't have anything personal against Chris. I think he was a good governor of New Jersey. But at the end of the day, there's a reason he's at 1% and Trump's over 50%, because I think the majority of Republican voters, and frankly, I think a major swath of independents in this country, believe that Trump's the guy, at least for now, that can get the job done. So, all of these people who claim that he's not the right guy aren't really getting out of the single digits.
Yeah, he also seemed to stand alongside President Putin and support him over his own intelligence services. He tried to schmooze the leader of North Korea. I mean, you list the upsides. There were interesting downsides as an international viewer to the years of Donald Trump. Just hearing also that the co-defendant, the valet, has pleaded not guilty. This is Walt Nauta. He has pleaded not guilty also, so both of them now pleading not guilty. I want to talk about the lies. The allegation is that he got his attorney to lie before the FBI. The Washington Post said by the end of his term of 4 years, there were 30,000 lies by Donald Trump, 30,573. It averaged 21 claims a day. Why does America want to have a liar as their commander-in-chief?
Well, look, I don't look at the Washington Post as any kind of arbiter of the truth. These are people who mislead America every day. These are people who have taken a side. I don't look at the Washington Post as some kind of arbiter. And when it comes to lying, I don't think that's unique to any president of the United States. I mean, I could go on and we could be spending hours talking about some of the things that Joe Biden has told the American people.
No, well, I tell you, we could spend hours talking about it because we could spend hours talking about it because there were so many, whether it rained on Inauguration Day, whether he had record crowds that day, right to the very end, when he lied that he'd won the election.
Right. Well, look, as I said, I don't think any politician has a monopoly on not telling the truth.
Where do you see this going? Are you happy to have a candidate for the grand old party who's fighting so many court cases, including this federal, serious, narrowly targeted action?
Well, look, no. I mean, but at the end of the day, I mean, if you look at how he has fared, there's a lot of people who view this as an attack on him, and his poll numbers, both within the primary and against Joe Biden in a general election, have actually gone up, and his opponents have gone down since these charges, not just here, but the first ones in New York. As a campaign operative that's been doing this for 30 years, I never want a candidate that's having to deal with legal issues, number one. Number two, as somebody who's been around classified information for over almost, a quarter of a century, I don't minimize the mishandling or misstorage of it. Don't get me wrong on any of that. That being said, I think that the American people, even the greatest haters of Donald Trump, look at what's happening and say, this is really interesting that you've got everyone from Jim Comey, the former FBI director, to Hillary Clinton, to Joe Biden, to former Vice President Mike Pence, who have all had classified information taken with them. Joe Biden had it for literally years in his personal office, in his home, in his garage, in the Penn Biden Center in Washington, D.C. I mean, literally one box was in an open garage in a box by his Corvette. I don't consider that exactly safe storage of our national security. So if we're going to talk about properly storing and securing national security, which I do think we should, and don't get me wrong, I don't minimize the lack thereof by anybody, but I do think that for so many Americans, they look at this and say, this is very selective prosecution.
Well, Joe Biden, as you know, is subject himself to a special counsel investigation. He said he did not know about the documents and he doesn't know what's in those documents, and his lawyers have told him not to inquire. But that is an ongoing court case. Fascinating to speak to you. Well, you know, it's ongoing. Look, we wait and see what happens with that one as well, certainly. Yeah. Just reading, actually, that when the Trump lawyer Todd Blanche entered the former president's plea, Blanche said, "We most certainly enter a plea of not guilty." Just very quickly, Sean Spicer, to you, was he reckless with documents which were a threat to national security? And two, should he step aside?
Well, no, he shouldn't step aside. I mean, that's not my call to make, number one, but no. I think considering the nature that I just laid out, I mean, if you're going to step aside, then Joe Biden should step aside for mishandling classified information. As I said to you a moment ago, I think that classified information should be stored and handled according to the guidance that's set forward. It shouldn't be dismissed by anybody. But I also think, as I said, that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You can't just have selective prosecution and weaponization of our judicial system to go only after certain people.
Sean Spicer, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Sky News. They're former head of comms, of course, for Donald Trump. Used to watch you at the White House all the time, obviously. But Mr. Trump, he has been in court on the 13th floor. Both defendants now not guilty pleas entered by both of them. That is Donald Trump and his valet. Let us go to John Sparks, our international correspondent, who is at the back of the court anticipating, you know, at some point quite soon, John, the former president to depart.
That's right, Anna. It does look like they are getting ready for Donald Trump's departure. He travels within a 10-car convoy that is put on by the U.S. Secret Service. Let's just step out. I'm going to ask my colleague Chris to step out a bit. We may get told to go back by the police. That did happen about 5 minutes ago, but you can see they are getting ready. SUVs from the police, motorcycle riders, there are Secret Service agents down where he will come out from the basement of the building. All the while, we've got pro-Trump supporters driving on motorcycles and in big vehicles doing a circle around the entire court complex. Really is quite an extraordinary sight to see. The police here did have concerns about the security here, but it does seem to have passed off peacefully, at least at this point in time. I haven't seen anything like it. You had pro-Trump supporters, several hundred of them, mingling with anti-Trump supporters, prominent members of the American media, all operating in the same space. It did seem chaotic at times, but it seems to have gone okay. There were concerns from federal officials, particularly around the possibility that people could be carrying arms. You are allowed to do that. You can use, or you can carry concealed arms with a permit in Florida. So it was an unpredictable situation. So far, it seems to have passed off relatively peacefully. You can see over on the other side of the road, lots of pro-Trump supporters. They want to see him off. They've been here for hours in what I can tell you is the blistering heat. It has been very, very hot indeed. But you know, they've had a platform here. They've had an opportunity to express and expand on their views. A lot of people here, they feel like they don't get that chance. They don't get access to the US media, and they've had that today. So really interesting situation here around the courthouse. We do expect Donald Trump, who has pleaded not guilty, to leave in the next few minutes, Anna. They do seem to be making preparations now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, John. We'll keep your pictures, certainly, but let's bring in now Omarosa Newman, author and former political aide to President Trump. I mean, you've worked with him. You know, how will he be feeling today, do you think, sat in a federal courtroom having to plead not guilty to risking national security?
First of all, thank you for having me on what is nothing but a historic day in the U.S. Donald Trump finally being held accountable for his, reckless behavior, particularly being reckless with some of the most secret documents that anyone in this country could ever lay their eyes on, placing them in his bathroom, placing them in back rooms, closets, and on stages and ballrooms. Unacceptable, and what you're seeing is the results of Donald Trump's reckless behavior.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've heard his lawyer who came outside court saying that this is a deliberate attacking of a political opponent, the weaponization of the Department of Justice. I mean, we've heard it all weekend, haven't we, since that indictment was released and published last Thursday. It's been a fascinating weekend. Witch hunt, scam, hoax, you name it, he said it. Does that have traction, do you think, with the American people? Because they won't read this indictment, will they?
Well, Donald thinks that if he says it over and over again, it becomes true, but that is just not the facts that are laid out by Jack Smith in this particular indictment. In the indictment, it shows someone who not only was aware that they were in possession of sensitive documents, but who tried to conceal those documents. Donald Trump would not have had to go into this Miami courtroom if he had simply returned the documents when he became aware that they were wanted back by the agency that oversees the handling of these historic documents. Donald Trump went a bit further in his scheme by moving them, playing a cat and mouse with the authorities. This is just another one of the examples that Donald Trump truly believes that he is above the law.
Yeah, while you're talking, Omarosa, we're watching pictures from the back of the courthouse. Remarkable, really, what a small area has been cordoned off with just flimsy plastic police tape. Clearly there's a lot of police activity here, Miami PD, county level, no doubt US Marshals, security services are in the vicinity too, who knows. But it has been a very close proximity, what's been happening here today, of pro and anti-Trump supporters. They've got very near, and they're all now waiting to see if they can catch a glimpse, for some of them, of their hero. But it's been fascinating to talk to those who, suggest that this is a historic moment, but that the president is a victim, which is how, of course, his defense team will present this. But what will the impact be, do you think, on polling, even when he was found liable of sexual abuse? His poll numbers went up.
Unlike Sean Spicer, a guest that you had on right before I came on, I'm not really concerned about Donald Trump's political future. I'm really concerned about the safety and security of our servicemen and women who are on the front lines, of our military, of our national secrets being handled in a proper way. Donald Trump is thinking about how can he get back in the White House, and I'm thinking more about how we secure some of the most sensitive information contained in documents. How do we secure them in a proper way? I listened to the equivalency that Sean Spicer tried to make with this contrast. Biden, when made aware that he had those documents, quickly returned them. On the other hand, Donald Trump, when he became aware that those documents needed to be brought back, he put them on his plane and flew them to another state, to Bedminster, or he moved them around. There is no question in this indictment that Donald Trump also showed some of these sensitive documents to others. Donald Trump must be held to account for this reckless behavior. That's what you saw today. Donald Trump walking to a courtroom, being arraigned, and having to enter a plea just like any other accused criminal in this country.
Well, to quote Asa Hutchinson, another of the nominees for Republican candidate, no one is found guilty until the process goes through. I understand that Donald Trump has now been remanded, so arrested, pled not guilty, now remanded. The case presumably then goes to trial. Do you think there will be delaying tactics, Omarosa, or do you think we will see this side of November the 5th, 2024, the date of the election?
Yeah, I've known Donald Trump for almost 20 years, and the one thing that I know about him is that he knows how to manipulate the criminal justice system. He knows how to delay. He knows how to distract. But there are more legal cases that are down the pike that he has to face. This is just one of many, including Jack Smith's handling of the investigation to the January 6th investigation, what's happening in the state of Georgia with his interference of the election, and many other accusations being launched at Donald Trump. And yet he still, in a very selfish way, wants to be president of this country. You can't do both. You can't be a criminal and try to lead the country, but Donald Trump is trying to do both. And I think it's a very sad day in this country, what you're seeing there in Miami, Florida, Donald Trump being arraigned, being remanded, and being taken into this process that no other leader of this country should have to face, or should. In this case, Donald Trump could have avoided it, but no, he continued to, as is alleged, to try to avoid returning these documents to their rightful place.
Well, we're all trying to work out why he might have kept these documents, whether he didn't understand the classification, which, if you read the indictment, turns out not to be the case. He talks about, describes them to people as being top secret. Chris Christie, another of those candidates, former New Jersey governor, said that his feeling is that Donald Trump could not bear the idea of losing to Joe Biden. He still wanted the trappings of president, and part of the trappings was retaining these documents. For someone like you who's known Donald Trump so long, how was that bit of pop psychology fit in with your assessment of why he might have kept them?
I think Chris Christie is completely just off on this one. Donald Trump kept those documents for one simple reason. It's because he wanted to. And what Donald Trump wants to do, he just does. He doesn't think that he'll face consequences. And when he was asked to return them, he did what he wanted to do. He asked his assistant to move the documents, to bring the documents. Who knows if he's copied these documents and disseminated them? Any number of scenarios could have happened while Donald Trump held on to these very sensitive documents. I had a top secrets clearance while I was in the White House. This is the second time in 20 years I've worked at the highest office in this land. There is extensive training as to how to handle these documents. There is briefings on how you store these documents. They are tracked and numbered. You have to go to extraordinary means to try to keep these documents. That means that Donald Trump just disregarded all of the procedures and systems that are in place to keep Americans safe, to keep these secrets in the rightful hands of the government and not in our enemies. And so Donald Trump, he knew what he was doing, and he just kept the documents because he simply wanted to.
Omarosa Newman, great to have you on. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts there. And certainly Ambassador John Bolton, who was his national security advisor, said that Donald Trump often would not pay a great deal of attention in the intelligence briefings that he gave, but did pay enough attention to take some of these documents. The words of John Bolton a bit earlier. Omarosa, thank you very much indeed. Lovely to have you on. So let's just show you the exclusive pictures that Sky News got of Donald Trump as we wait for him to leave court here in downtown Miami. He was overnighting, obviously, at his Doral golf resort, 4 championship courses there. He'd spent the evening with his attorneys at dinner. This was him departing earlier this afternoon for the roughly 30-minute journey to this courthouse. With his security detail, obviously, as ever, a large motorcade for him, waving to those staying there. This was still open, the Doral, for guests to stay overnight.
President Trump, how are you feeling?
Great.
It was great that he shouted there, and that is part of the case, I suppose, here, that the places that Donald Trump chooses to make home, they are open. There's certainly the suggestion about Mar-a-Lago, which is what you might call the scene of the crime in this federal action, that it had 10,000 people passing through at the time that these documents were stored, 150 members of staff, permanent and temporary, that it had 150 events taking place there. You know, people posting on Facebook all of the times that they were there when these documents were in storage rooms, in Trump's bedroom, in a bathroom, in a ballroom, and in showers. So that is part of the problem for Donald Trump, the allegation that his home was open and accessible to others while he held these documents. Let me bring in former federal prosecutor here in the Southern District of Florida, Alex Soto, joins me once again. The helicopter's in the sky. I mean, what does that say? You know, perhaps he's leaving quite soon because he has now been remanded. What does that mean in U.S. jurisdiction?
Remanded means that he has been returned. He's on bail, essentially. He's on bond. That's all it means.
And the bail here would involve what?
Probably a low-level bond of some sort, of personal surety bond is what they would call it, with certain terms.
In fact, I've got an update on that. Hold your thought. There are travel restrictions and a no cash bond was required. This is where they put a dollar figure on it, but no cash passes hands.
Correct.
Changes hands, is that correct?
Correct.
That was Judge Goodman ruling. Trump was not allowed to communicate with potential witnesses in the case. Trump's former aide, Walt Nauta, was also charged in connection with the case, and he pleaded not guilty as well. The hearing, of course, closed to cameras. So there are travel restrictions and a no cash bond. Does that sound typical to you?
It sounds right, and let's remember that...
apologies, I'm going to correct myself. I'm going to read the first line properly. Trump was allowed to leave court without conditions or travel restrictions. I'm going to start again. And a no cash bond was required. So no travel restrictions and without conditions. I'm going to correct myself. Apologies.
Sure, and let's remember that he was not arrested and brought in. He was issued a summons and voluntarily turned himself in. So obviously the risk of flight is minimal, non-existent, and also because of who he is, be very difficult. So that's not surprising at all. I am a little surprised to hear that there were no conditions. I thought the condition with respect to contacting witnesses would make sense, would be merited in this case because he's charged with obstructing justice. So that's a little bit surprising.
Yeah, interesting. So, painting the picture behind us, it looks like he's coming out of the underground car park, which is the way he went in. He did not choose, like he did in New York, to choose a more open entrance and exit. You know, perhaps scarred by the pictures in New York where they released stills of him inside that courtroom and CCTV in the hallway of him walking into, you know, for the first time ever, face court action for a former or sitting president. This, of course, is a different ball game. These are federal charges, and for many people, the magnitude of what he faces here is in quite a different league to what's happened at state level in New York.
Correct. He's very protective of his brand, of his identity. And this indictment is different than any other he's ever faced. The speaking indictment spells out in pictures and words allegations, if proven true, that are very damning, very compelling.
Then he'll leave here. He will go eventually towards the airport, go off in Trump Force One, as they call it, his plane, to Bedminster, New Jersey. It is his birthday tomorrow, his 77th birthday. No doubt he wants to be amongst family and friends. Tonight he holds a fundraiser, and then at 8:15 local time, which is 1:15 in the UK, he will do his presentation. He will, you know, give his statement, presumably repeating what we heard from one of his lawyers, that this is a weaponization of the justice system. Now, does that get traction, do you think, with people listening?
Well, there's long-standing protocol that dictates that the FBI and the Department of Justice operate free of any meddling by the White House, and that dates back decades. And in fact, there was an instance dating back to the Nixon administration where Nixon didn't want documents or a recording turned over to the special prosecutor, and both the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General resigned in the face of orders not to produce those audio tapes. So there's long-standing protocol of that separation. it's important for that separation to exist and persist in order for the public to maintain confidence in DOJ and FBI.
Alex Soto, former federal prosecutor here in the Southern District of Florida, thank you very much indeed. The Trump hearing has ended. The atmosphere is certainly building out the back of the courtroom. You can hear it now. The noise is ratcheting up. Let's go to John Sparks. John.
Okay, Anna, it does look like Donald Trump is ready to leave the courthouse now. We've seen armed members of the police, armed members of the U.S. Secret Service getting into several black vehicles that I presume will form part of his 10, 12 vehicle convoy. We've had the police here telling us to get back. And the crowds that we have seen at the front of the courthouse over there, they've pretty much transposed themselves here to the back of the courthouse. There's a huge crowd now on a walkway by a shopping mall, waving their flags. There are anti-Trump protesters as well. They've been arguing with each other, expletives used, a few minor scuffles that we have seen. And you know, it's very hot here. Tempers are getting short. People have been out here for a long time, so perhaps it's understandable. They're major trouble so far, but it does look like Donald Trump is ready to go. He'll be, from my analysis, it looks like he'll be traveling this way. Motorcycle riders pointed in this direction. The convoy getting assembled. We've seen armed members of the U.S. Secret Service getting into some of the vehicles. Well, I'm just going to ask my colleague Chris to move to the left slightly. There is an underground garage to the left. It'll be to the right of your shot. You will see Secret Service agents there at the opening to that garage. They'll be waiting for Donald Trump to come out. He went in underground, he'll be coming out on bail, as we've been hearing, with a cashless bond and travel restrictions. There we are, support from many of a variety of different pro-Trump groups who are here. There are blacks for Trump, pro-life for Trump, anti-immigration for Trump, Cubans for Trump. I'm being reminded here where I am standing. Different ethnicities, different racial groups, a wide variety of different groups. They've come here. They've had a chance to express themselves, to expand on their views, with much of the U.S. media present here to record their views. Here we go. We've got the motorcycles here getting ready. And you know, this is what people want to see. This is what they've been waiting for. They want to see him. You know, it has felt today like Donald Trump is something of a self-anointed saint here to save the nation. That is what people say. Lots of banners. I stand with Trump. Trump is our president. Ready to go. Hundreds of people here, ready to catch a glimpse. The mood is upbeat. Certainly not one of disappointment that he has been indicted. Nobody seems to think that his political career is over or threatened in any way. I haven't met anybody who has said that. Many here believe that the legal process, that he will use the legal process, or at least he will use it in a way that is not quick, that he'll slow it down, that he will continue to campaign for the Republican nomination for the presidency, that he will use it in a way to buttress his arguments that he is being targeted by the Biden administration. He's been targeted by the Department of Justice, targeted by the FBI, and that he is making a sacrifice for the people. That is his argument, and people here buy it. And there are a lot of people here. We're being told to move back. But we do seem ready now, Donald Trump, to leave. The people here, they are not downbeat. I haven't seen anybody here who expresses sadness about what has happened. Certainly injustice, but no real sadness. People think he is an election winner, and somehow he will get through this obstacle and he will win
the election. Yeah, I am. People here nodding their heads. Huge crowds underneath a shopping mall, shouting. They want to see him. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Getting ready to go. Entrances out. Clearly choosing this one. This is a large convoy headed with police, motorcycle outriders. You know, the police have got to clear the streets around the court complex because there has been a sort of do-it-yourself pro-Trump procession in motorcycles and large trucks going on all day. So they've got to clear those streets. They've got to get them off the road so they can get Trump out of here. We expect that he will be going north to his golf club in New Jersey, Bedminster. He's expected to give public remarks there. He may stop, however, for a meal in Miami. We're not sure. That is a possibility. They seem ready to go. Big security operation for the U.S. Secret Service. Some concerns from U.S. officials here about the way the Miami police have decided to do this. You've had pro-Trump supporters and you've had anti-Trump supporters mingling with high-profile members of the American media, all in the same space. Here we go. People starting to chant Trump for USA. Seen all sorts of different MAGA supporters.
This is what love looks like, people.
This is what love looks like, people. Heard? There we go. Huge roar of approval from the crowd here. It's a large convoy moving slowly. We don't know which vehicle Trump is in, but it's celebratory, isn't it? This doesn't look like a man who's just been charged with 37 federal criminal counts. We love Trump, people say. USA. They see him, the rightful leader of the United States. I wonder if we'll get away. Armed officers in some of these vehicles. The people rushing towards one of the vehicles. They may have slowed down, given them away. They're chaotic scenes. Police really outnumbered here, doing their best. Now they're wanting people back. People running after one of the vehicles. Again, not the scenes that you would associate with someone who's just had to plead not guilty to 37 federal criminal counts. Back to you, Anna.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's that from a glance. I can't confirm that.
Well, quite extraordinary scenes here down in the courthouse in Miami. We are at the side of where John Sparks are. People were running to catch a glimpse. The atmosphere was more rock concert than arraignment. Quite amazing to see the support that Donald Trump still has for these people. Clearly a protester tried to get in the way. It looked like, I say a protester, hard to see from these overhead pictures, pulled out of the way by the security services who still work alongside this former US president. But from where I am, people are still rushing towards that yellow police tape to try to get whatever glimpse they can, even though the US president, as you can see from these pictures, is already on his way. The MAGA supporters out. The people who think this is a weaponization of the justice system out in support for him. And you can see why those Republican candidates who are in single digits in this race feel that they don't get traction because they can't get the attention that this magnet does, the former US president, number 45 in terms of the history of American presidency. The attraction he gets. But this, of course, is making American history. The first time that a former US president has appeared in a federal courthouse, and he, as you know, stands accused of risking national security. John Sparks, you're still in the crowd. The atmosphere, quite extraordinary. The building of the sound levels and the drama for people here as they come, as you say, to see the man. You read it out there. This is what love looks like. You know, the man they kind of adore.
Look at this, bro.
Okay, we've got an anti-Trump supporter. He was within the crowd, been singled out. Looks like he's been roughed up. Okay, and the police then had something of a job to get him out. Hundreds of people around him telling him exactly what they thought of him. He's safe now. He's been pulled out of the crowd, hostile crowd by the police, by the Miami police. To be honest, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of this. I really am surprised. But, you know, it's been very hot, tempers are frayed, people have been out here all day. And I think we just had the finale. Donald Trump leading the court complex, this large convoy. And there, one individual wearing a sort of old-style prison outfit. I know I saw him earlier, he was carrying a sign saying, "Lock him up." And the people here didn't like it, and I think some of them at least have turned on it. But the police have got him out, he's safe. Anyway, it's again, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of it, but it is a sign of the depth of feeling here. Some of the arguments that have gone on, been intense. And I think it's fine now that people are calming down. Anna?
I wasn't sure if you were aware of what happened.
You saw it, right?
Yeah, I saw the arrest.
We've got the pictures.
Well, I don't know if we've lost John Sparks. They're very noisy scenes, as you can see. Our US correspondent, Mark Stone, was right by all of that happening as the man with all the bars, you know, the prison jumpsuit kind of look, rushed a car, right?
Yes, one of the motorcade, he rushed one of the cars in the motorcade. I don't know if it was the one that the former president was in, but this is a man who we've seen over the course of the past few days. He's been everywhere. He's clearly anti-Trump, wearing a prison uniform, lock him up. It says there are many more supporters here of Donald Trump than there are those against him. But what was interesting, and I think what is potentially a concern, a reflection for the days ahead, is the tension. The police arrested him as you would expect. He had just jumped or tried to lunge towards a car holding a former president. The police did exactly what you would expect them to do. What happened next, though, was telling, because the pro-Trump people then crowded round and started jeering at this man who was face down on the ground. So a moment of tension, nothing more than that, but a suggestion of tensions right across the country that people will be worried about.
Yeah, it's unbelievably noisy here, isn't it? But there's actually, you know, forget that moment of trouble. Yeah. It has been calm, excitable almost, has it not? The police going through at the moment, as you can see, on their bicycles, whistling to try and clear the roads, which is full of all these supporters. But I described it as almost more like a rock concert at that moment. Apart from that incident, which I fully understand is serious, but the atmosphere was building, the noise levels, the crescendo of tension and sound for people here was amazing.
And that will be a relief for the authorities, both here in Miami-Dade, but also you know, in Washington. The federal authorities will have been watching this closely. We know the Secret Service were concerned about the level of security that Miami-Dade had put in here at a state level. They thought maybe there should be more security. So there was concern, and it's absolutely true that this moment has passed without any serious incident, with the exception of this minor incident. Yeah. The question is the days ahead, because it's clear from what the president's lawyer said outside court. They are trying to pit the people against the institutions that are supposed to hold this country together. Yeah,
the judicial system as well, which is what holds up democracy.
He did it to the election when he claimed and continues to claim that he won the last election. He was undermining the electoral process. Now, as we saw in New York with the other indictment, he is trying to undermine the judicial system. And according to a Watergate lawyer I spoke to yesterday, that is a deeply dangerous thing to do.
Well, you call it anarchy at the end game of that, right? That's the problem, I suppose, for people. Yeah. We're not there. They will be satisfied how it went today, because the only thing holding protesters back was small bits of plastic police tape and some plastic barricades.
And the heat, maybe.
And maybe the heat. But people are still milling about in this sense of excitement. As you say, they will watch the days and weeks ahead. What happens now, though? We've had him plead. He's pleaded not guilty. They're both out. They've both been remanded, him and Walt Nutter, his valet, who's the co-defendant in this, the man accused of moving the boxes. The question now is the timing of this trial and what that means for the US electoral process.
Yes, and the conventional wisdom is that this trial will probably not complete before the election happens next November. There will be some very interesting pre-trial motions, as they're known, arguments that Donald Trump's team will put forward as they go towards a trial. Now, one of the points that they will argue, which I think is fascinating, is that they will say that some of the evidence is inadmissible in court because it's evidence taken from Trump's lawyer at the time these alleged crimes were taking place. They will claim that the attorney-client privilege between Trump and his lawyer was broken, and therefore some of the key evidence for the prosecution is not eligible in court. If the judge here agrees with that defense of Donald Trump, then a key part of the prosecution's case will be wiped away, which will be a fascinating moment. But yeah, we're looking at a long legal process, and they will also have to coordinate with the district attorney in the Southern District of New York because of the court case that's going on up there as well.
So it's just after 9 o'clock. You're watching Sky News. Some extraordinary scenes here in Miami. It's a federal courthouse. The former US president is up, or has been up, on 37 counts in a federal action which was brought about by an FBI investigation, a grand jury subpoena, a special counsel who was set up to investigate whether or not he risked national security by taking documents from the White House, storing them inappropriately at his home here in Florida, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, whether he then obstructed justice and the effort to get those documents back. And as you heard there also, whether he got his lawyer to lie to the authorities unwittingly about these documents. The 45th US president making history today by appearing in a federal courthouse for the first time. He was arrested, he was fingerprinted, a former picture of him was used, and he has now been released on remand pending trial in this federal action. Well, earlier we got these exclusive pictures of him when he was about to leave one of his residences, the Doral Golf Resort just west of the airport here in Miami. Let's take a look at those pictures. So Donald Trump had flown in from Bedminster, his golf resort in New Jersey, yesterday. He spent the night here at Doral with its 4 championship golf courses, a resort that he set up in the 1960s, where he had meetings with his attorneys. His son, Eric, was there. Our producers shouting him a question, how are you doing? And he replied, great, something that Eric Trump had also said. Apologies for the noise here. Everybody in a vehicle with a flag on is now tooting their horns as they go past the courthouse here in Miami. But huge amounts of security, as you can see, as ever, for the former US president. Sat in his car for a while before making the journey, some 20, 30 minutes, I suppose it was, from the Doral Golf Resort to the courthouse here in Miami, where he was in court, processed, booked, went through that arraignment where he is effectively presented with the counts against him, 37 in total. Counts 1 to 31 pertain to the alleged secret documents that he was withholding from the FBI. You might remember that raid back in August last year, where the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago and searched through, trying to find the documents, eventually finding 102 documents, 337 documents with classifications handed over in total, but 102 of those seized by the FBI in that raid last August, which began and led us to this. Amazing scenes, I have to say, outside the courthouse as he left. John Sparks, our international correspondent, was outside the court, And John, witnessing one protester being pulled away and bundled, but otherwise, give us a sense of the atmosphere there.
Yeah, very, very lively. I mean, this protester, I had seen him around earlier. He was wearing a sort of old-style prison uniform and a sign saying, "Lock him up." And he was in the crowd when the main convoy, Donald Trump's 10, 12-car convoy, left the courthouse. And he was probably expressing his views, and some of the pro-Trump crowd here turned on him. The police had to wade in, pull him out. It's quite explosive scenes. They managed to get him out. I don't think he was hurt, but it goes to show the depth of feeling here. Let's just come round. I think that the temperature has gone down a little bit here, but we've got a man on a megaphone. He's got a cross there. He's asking people to pray for Donald Trump. He sees, okay, understood. Sorry, okay, we're going to go across. Told by a police officer. They're trying to clear the streets. We're going to go across here. Okay. You can see the front of the courthouse here, a very large police presence there. It's basically gone, according to plan. There were concerns we were hearing from federal officials about the situation here. The area guarded pretty lightly. You can see this flimsy yellow tape stretching right around the complex. And you had the sort of extraordinary scenes of pro-Donald Trump protesters, a few anti-Donald Trump people, and members of the American media and the international media all mingling in together, sharing the same space. We did see...
John Sparks, I'm going to interrupt you. Apologies. John Sparks, I'm going to interrupt you. Apologies. Look, he has got out of his motorcade. He has entered a cafe. Let's just listen to the atmosphere in there.
Oh, my man, come here. I'm never going to fight this guy. Jorge, how you doing? Very good, sir. He's a great guy. He's the champion right here. He likes to fight. You're the champion. You're the champion. That's good. We're doing for you. Yes, go ahead, please. Come on. Let's gather everyone. Come on.
Your presence, Father. And Father, we thank you that if you are with us, who can be against us? And Father, we thank you that you've given us President Trump to stand against the wave that's coming against our nation. Father, as Cuban Americans, we declare communism will not come to our shores. Father, we thank you that you've anointed him and called him for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Padre, vengo ante ti a pedirte por este varón, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Bendito tú eres, Padre, creador del universo. Te pido que unjas a este hombre con toda fortaleza, disipando toda tiniebla, todo principado que se haya levantado en contra de él. Dale fortaleza en sus manos, dale firmeza en su cuerpo, dale ese espíritu de poder y dominio propio. En el nombre de Jesús lo declaramos libre de toda maldición y toda maldición. Amén. Amén.
Thank you very much.
Yes, coming right back. Jesus loves you.
Donald Trump wants to be seen, remember that. It was our understanding that he might be heading to a Cuban cafe. Presume this is the same one. It was called Versailles if it is, posing for photographs and waving to people. But remember, he went in the underground parking of this Miami courthouse. We could not see him in court. And this is a man for whom this is free publicity for an election campaign that he's sworn he will continue to fight. Donald Trump in this Cuban cafe called Versailles, surrounded by supporters. This was organized and swept before. He's deliberately doing this to make sure that he is seen.
Food for everyone. Food for
of favorable support. Let's listen again.
Thank you very much, darling. You take care of yourself. Where's Jorge? Right here, sir. Let's get a picture. Come on. This guy, great champ. Just don't fight him. One this way, sir. Justin. One this way.
Trump tiene que salir de presidente otra vez. Tiene que salir otra vez.
Look at the outside.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Some birthday. Some birthday. We got a government that's out of control. Great group. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, dear President. Happy birthday to you. Picture. New York Times right there. It's a great photographer. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. That was great. Really nice. Thank you. Are we getting, I think it's going great. I think it's a rigged deal here. We have a rigged country. We have a country that's corrupt. We have a country that's got no borders. We have a country that's got nothing but problems. We're a nation in decline. And then they do this stuff. And you see where the people are. We love the people. And you see where they are. You see the crowds and everything else. We have a country that is in decline like never before. And we can't let it happen. I'm going to make a little speech tonight in Bedminster. And I hope you're going to be there.
Can you start tomorrow?
You're going to be there. You can come too if you want, okay? Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Oh, I love that. Thank you very much.
God bless.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Moving.
Abre la puerta, ten cuidado.
Well, a rendition, should I say, of a happy birthday for his 77th birthday tomorrow. A pop at the government, cameras aloft. Everything is a publicity moment for Donald Trump as he leaves that Versailles bakery, a Cuban bakery, we understand, and makes his way back into the vehicle.
News desk.
And then we'll head to Miami International Airport to head straight to Bedminster, New Jersey, where he will make more public remarks, but took the opportunity there to be surrounded by supporters. And as I said, I think it's going great, is what he had to say. The country's corrupt. We've got no borders, nothing but problems. It's in decline. We can't let it happen. A man who is determined to continue to stand to be the nominee for the Republican Party, despite the legal issues now facing him, including a pending trial in a federal court. John Sparks has been out there with the crowds, extraordinary atmosphere, amazing moment inside that bakery as well on the way to the airport. How would you sum up the day?
It's been an extraordinary day. I mean, one of the things that has surprised me is that the mood here is, it's almost celebratory, isn't it? It's like a conquering hero returns. And we know that this is Trump country, right? We know that he's wildly popular here. But, you know, he's just been up on the 13th floor being charged. He's had his charges read out to him. He's had to plead not guilty to every single charge. He's been let out of the building on a bond. We believe there are travel restrictions upon him. Yet he gets into his convoy. He then goes to a bakery and he is greeted again as a hero. I thought those remarks were actually telling. I think it's going great, he said. Our nation is corrupt. Our nation is in decline. We've really got to do something about it. It's really going well for him, isn't it? He is a master at using this sort of platform for his own political gain. He has no real competitors. Let's be honest about it. In the race for the Republican nomination for the presidency, he's up against the governor of Florida, DeSantis. He's got something like a 34 point lead in that race. He really is, he has at this point anyway, an insurmountable lead in this. And he looks like a campaigning someone who, he looks very, very confident, doesn't it? It looks like he's campaigning, he's milking the opportunity that he has been given by all this extraordinary exposure. And we've seen hundreds of protesters here. They're loving it.
And they're still milling about. They're still driving around with their flags. They're still honking their horns. But the action is at the Versailles Cuban Cuisine Bakery, as I read from their sign. The motorbike outriders look like they are on the move. And they are leading the motorcade with the Secret Service detail that guards a former president. He'll be back in the aircon conditions, no doubt, of those vehicles as he makes his way towards Miami International Airport to get on Trump Force One, as they colloquially call it, the Boeing 757, which will fly him back north. But quite a moment too for those people who were inside. The rendition, if I can say it now, of Happy Birthday for him. He's heading to a fundraising event tonight, and certainly when he posted on Truth Social earlier, he talked about the indictment that he's facing, or he faced today, and the arraignment, and then asked for money. And every moment for him is part of his campaigning to get the Republican nomination. And as he said at the weekend, the small dollar donations are in record figures. This is free publicity for him at this stage in the campaign.
Yeah, he sees an opportunity and he's using it. And you can see the skill. You can see that he is doing it very, very well. You know, last night we went to a Republican fundraiser up in Palm Beach, and we heard a Republican firebrand, a woman called Carrie Lake, speak for him. And she told the audience there, she said, hey, listen to me. I want you to empty your wallets. I want you to empty your wallets over the next 12 months, give the money to Trump, give the money to the Trump campaign so we can save the nation. And it is, the arguments are put in these existential terms. You know, the country is on a precipice. The country's in decline. We've got to save it. We've got to act now. And there's an audience for it. There is a ready audience for this. But I think it was interesting last night, we heard from several speakers, including Carrie Lake as well. A couple of the speakers said, look, we also need to reach out to swing voters. We need to reach out to independent voters. We even have to speak to Democrats, she said. We've got to help them find that hidden Republican part of themselves that they have long buried. We need them as well. And I think that says, interestingly, that there are a lot of people in this country who are not necessarily akin to Trump's message. They're not attracted to this. They find it difficult. The whole thing about the photos in Mar-a-Lago, the boxes in the shower room, the boxes in the storeroom, the potentially classified top secret documents scattered along the floor, that doesn't play well for everyone. And you know, a lot of people here, they're not willing to hear it. They don't want to discuss it. They want to talk about so-called acts of corruption on the part of Biden and Hillary Clinton and Obama as well. But I don't think it plays well for everybody. So a note of caution there.
And a note of caution that Carrie Lake failed in her bid to be Arizona governor. And the accusation against Trump is he's a 3-time loser. And Carrie Lake was part of the midterms that did not actually do that well for the Republican Party. So it's easy to get wrapped up in the enthusiastic crowd here. And remember that he lost the last election. They're on the move, as you can see. The motorcade with the motorbike outriders leading them. I'm presuming they will be heading straight to the airport, but it was a stopover for him at the Versailles Cafe. It is a landmark in the Miami Cuban community, a base for Cuban exiles, in fact, in earlier generations. It's been created as a must-visit spot for candidates for many years. Both presidents, George Bush, H.W. Bush and George W. Bush visited, as well as the late Senator John McCain when he ran for president. Bill Clinton went there as well. So today it was the turn for Donald J. Trump. Let's have a listen.
I think it's going great. I think it's a rigged deal here. We have a rigged country. We have a country that's corrupt. We have a country that's got no borders. We have a country that's got nothing but problems. We're a nation in decline, and then they do this stuff. And you see where the people are. We love the people, and you see where they are. You see the crowds and everything else. We have a country that is in decline like never before, and we can't let it happen. I'm going to make a little speech tonight in Bedminster, and I hope you're going to be there. Can you start tomorrow? I hope you're going to be there. You can come too if you want. Okay? Thank you, everybody. Thank you. God bless Donald Trump. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you, posing for photographs, everyone with their mobile phone at the ready taking a photograph. So what's next then? We can see that motorcade heading for the international airport. A packed 2 days. I don't know if he's exhausted. I know that many of the supporters here will be, John Sparks. But the next stage is to go to Bedminster, where he came from yesterday, and he'll make more remarks there, won't he? He wants to be heard.
He does. He will continue with this PR offensive that he has won off the back of this indictment that some will say that he is skillfully using. He is expected to make remarks at his country club at Bedminster in New Jersey. I think that the police here they'll probably be happy to see the back of him. I'm putting that as politely as I can. There were a lot of concerns about this. There was talk about thousands, potentially tens of thousands of pro-Trump supporters being here. Donald Trump himself went on social media asking people to come here, to rally behind him, to be his personal support here while he was in court on the 13th floor in courtroom number 3. But it has been, for the most, we saw some scuffles, we saw a little bit of violence at the very end, but it has largely been peaceful, despite the very unorthodox setup that we have seen here. We've seen hundreds of pro-Trump supporters mingling with a few anti-Trump supporters, and we've seen a lot of the best-known American media commentators here in tents right round the complex, and we've seen these extraordinary scenes where the pro-Trump supporters have gone right into the tent to barrack and to criticize and to tell these commentators exactly what they think of them. I mean, that is challenging media. Those are challenging circumstances to do a show, and you could see that they were relishing it. There's a lot of frustration there. A lot of people don't feel heard here, and I think that is part of the Donald Trump story. But for the most part, it's passed off peacefully. There were concerns in Florida. They have to be concealed. You need a permit to do it, but people can carry weapons, and there were concerns that if you had two sets of protesters getting together, things could get out of hand. It was unpredictable, but for the most part, things have passed off pretty peacefully.
Yes, including one of the protesters who had a raw pig's head on a stick with a Stars and Stripes flag coming out of the pig's mouth. You know, in a sense, that is reminiscent of some of those scenes in January the 6th, back in January the 6th, certainly. But, I mean, John, you talked about the experiences you've had over the last 24 hours. This is a place that is pro-Trump, Florida. In a sense, they will have pushed for the case to be held here. The jury will be taken from here, obviously. But despite the state's strong pro-Republican base, people in Miami are divided, as John's been finding out.
There are places in Miami where people go to let their hair down. Acts of escape when confrontation comes to town. But the prosecution of Donald Trump won't change their world.
You can just look at the past couple of years. Nothing changed people's, so why would this be any different?
I'm happy that he is actually being indicted for crimes he probably committed.
Okay.
I mean, there's evidence he committed them, so I just didn't think it was ever going to happen.
The prosecution of the former president has shocked many in Florida. The state votes Republican, and it votes for Donald Trump. And there are those who think the government is out to get him. But on Ocean Drive, people see things in a different way. At the world-famous Palace drag show, people say the former president doesn't speak to and hasn't spoken up for them.
What do you make of Donald Trump?
To be honest with you, I don't see him.
You don't see him?
I don't. I don't. Unfortunately, like we have someone that is against our community, and as you can see, we are not hurting anybody, and we are about love, and we are about acceptance, and we just want to be here and live life the way that everybody wants to live their lives fully.
90 minutes up the road, we found different performers on a very different stage. This event hosted by Club 47, part of Donald Trump's so-called base. And the featured speaker, aspiring office holder, Carrie Lake.
Trump is a warrior, a warrior. He's Godzilla, and they're just little tiny geckos running around.
Trump's indictment, the product of Joe Biden's fearful regime, she said, and we didn't see anyone objecting.
I love you, Donald J. Trump.
I wonder what people will think when they see boxes of government records in the storage room, his shower room, his bedroom, other rooms. It doesn't play well, does it?
Well, I think it doesn't play well for Joe Biden either, who has him in his garage.
If the former president's made mistakes, the Democrats have done worse. And the Republicans of Florida, well, they have a nation to save. John Sparks, Sky News, Miami Beach.
So Donald Trump and his motorcade won't be far away from Miami International Airport by now. As you've seen, he's went to a Cuban bakery, much beloved and visited by previous presidential candidates as well. And they sang happy birthday to him. He is 77 tomorrow. By then, he'll be back at his golf resort in Bedminster in New Jersey, no doubt surrounded by friends and family to wish him well for what has been no doubt a testing day for him here at the courthouse. Despite saying he's doing great, he has been accused of risking national secrets in a federal case. We understand he sat with his arms crossed during that, his regular red tie on, and did not speak for the 47 minutes of that hearing. Let's bring in Alex Soto, who's been with us throughout what has been an extraordinary day. The atmosphere has been amazing, no doubt quite quiet in the courtroom. Will they be satisfied, do you think, in the first of all, that it's over and how it has gone here?
I think they will be. I think this went as expected, probably, for them. I think this was as much branding and marketing his image as anything else, because inside the courtroom was going to be go to protocol. Right now, after they're done celebrating, they're going to have to get together and strategize, put their heads together and decide what sort of defense they're going to put forward in the face of this very compelling evidence in this indictment.
Well, I can see behind you and over there, there's arguments still between pro and antis. It's been happening on all corners all the time around here.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, nuts and bolts now, how much trouble is he in?
I'd be speculating, of course, but I think he's in a lot of trouble, given the fact that the indictment includes his own words. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned he's going to go back to Bedminster. It's the second scene of the alleged crime, where he showed classified information to someone, I believe it was a reporter, and commented during his interaction with that reporter that he didn't have the ability to declassify it, so he's allegedly showing knowledge that it required declassification before showing it, and said he's no longer president, so he doesn't have that authority. So seemingly showing through that conversation his knowledge of a number of essential elements that need to be proven, just encapsulated in that one conversation.
and indeed Bedminster means he put boxes on a plane and flew them out of Florida, taking them away from Mar-a-Lago, having said that they'd all been handed over. So this is part of the, the compelling case. Were you surprised by the level of detail in that indictment? It runs to 49 pages, including right at the back, the maximum length of prison time if found guilty,
right,
which no doubt makes very sobering reading for Trump's attorney. But were you surprised how much detail had been put in that by the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, who we understand was in that courtroom? He had a lot of security as well, so no doubt people are worried about him.
Mm-hmm.
But the detail was there, because they knew this was going to be politically febrile, do you think?
I do, and I think the reason, first of all, Jack Smith has that reputation, I don't know him personally, but for being meticulous. But if you're going to indict a former president, you're going to need this sort of detail, this sort of evidence set forth in the indictment for the case to have credibility. And I think this indictment is overflowing with that sort of credibility.
Looked like the camera on the helicopter was trying to find the Trump jet, the Boeing 757, which will take him up to New Jersey. As you can see, the motorcade is arriving at the airport. It's been a brief 24 hours, I suppose you might say, for President Trump, flying in from New Jersey, overnighting at Doral, his golf resort to the west of the airport, and now back again. But fundamentally, where does this leave him? When do we find out a trial date? How quickly will it be? And what importance is there about that timeline for the result of the US election?
Well, it's going to be hard to tell when the case gets set for trial. If in the absence of any motions filed which would toll speedy, the case would be immediately set for trial and thereafter continued, probably based on motions filed. And it's just impossible to tell when those things are going to be resolved. There may be interlocutory appeals taken on motions that are filed. Trump's team tends to fight hard, and delay is part of their defense strategy in all likelihood. So I don't see this happening, this case being set for trial, really, or tried anytime soon. Its implications on the election are clear. We're set for a November 2024 election, and this doesn't seem to be slowing down his election at all. In fact, it may be strengthening. As you saw it here, his supporters are out in force, and they're going to continue. In fact, he raises money through bad news somehow. So I don't know that this is going to have any effect unless he is convicted and jailed, which remains to be seen, and we don't even know when the trial would be. I think it's going to be a while.
Just before we let you go, I just want to ask you, do you think he'll go to jail?
I'd hate to speculate on that. He is entitled to his presumption of innocence. The indictment contains allegations. It doesn't contain evidence. And so I think that's probably all I should say about that.
Alex Soto, withholding the final thought there. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.
Sweltering heat in Miami. It's been a fascinating day, but we've really appreciated you being alongside us, former federal prosecutor there. But let's bring in Dave Arenberg now, state attorney for Palm Beach County. No doubt you've watched the proceedings today, what there is to see. Oh, apologies, we don't have him yet.
Okay.
Let me just show you the latest pictures then. It looks like that motorcade is pulling in to the international airport. Security, obviously, very tight once again as they move through the airport straight to their plane. You've seen in the comings and goings of Trump, both in Georgia, the Carolinas, here in Miami, and up at Newark, where he had to fly from to get to leave Bedminster. He does not have to walk far. This is special treatment, certainly, for a US president. Part of those trappings of being a president that Chris Christie talked about. He will go straight to the steps of his aircraft, that Boeing 757 that we've become used to seeing. So Dave Arenberg can join us now, state attorney for Palm Beach County. Obviously no cameras in court, but plenty to look at. Your thoughts of the day then, Mr. Arenberg?
I wish they had cameras in our federal courts. They need to do so for transparency purposes. I mean, this is an important case. The world is watching. And as far as today, it was a zoo outside, a lot of craziness, but inside it was pretty normal. It was just a defendant pleading not guilty, getting pre-trial release. It was quick and easy. He got fingerprinted, not even with all the ink, just with the electronic way, no mugshot, and then he was allowed to go home.
So what are you saying? He's been treated like any normal defendant?
Yes, any normal defendant with Secret Service protection. So in that sense, he was a little different. Also, other defendants have to take mug shots, but there was no need to take his mug shot. He's the most famous person, arguably, in the world. If he escapes, I don't think a mug shot's going to help us identify him.
You know, he's leaving Miami now. He goes back to a fundraiser tonight. He gets his election hat on. We've already seen him, you know, glad-handing people at this Cuban cafe. It's his birthday tomorrow. In a sense, he can slightly put it all behind him for a bit. But how much does this loom over him, do you think, as he starts to think about the GOP debates, the Republican debates at the back end of the summer?
It's got to start to get to him. And you can tell that this is serious because even Republicans are starting to get serious about it. He has new opponents like Chris Christie, and Nikki Haley is even talking about it. In the past, they've just rallied to his side and they drink the Kool-Aid and they just go ahead and support him no matter what. But you're starting to see some cracks in the armor. And I think that's a good thing. Look, it's one thing for the state of New York and an elected prosecutor, my counterpart in New York, to get an indictment against him for something that happened years ago. This is something that happened recently. It's a matter of national security, and it's being done by the #1 prosecutor in the United States, the United States Attorney General, through a special counsel, a person who means all business. This is important, and the indictment was damning. He faces years in prison.
That's fascinating that you say that. The 757 standing by to take him away. Do you actually think he might go to prison? I mean, you say he faces years in prison, but, you know, are there ways round this, do you think? Will the case fall at first hurdles about what's admissible as part of trial?
A lot depends on the judge, and this judge, Judge Cannon, unless she recuses herself, is someone who could really help Donald Trump because, first of all, he appointed her. That in itself doesn't mean she's biased. But she made rulings in this case last year in a matter she didn't have anything to do with. She intervened and then gave Trump everything he wanted and then some, to the point that a conservative appellate court overruled her and repudiated her. 2 of the 3 judges that did were appointed by Trump as well. And so they're watching her. And if she steps too far out of line, they could repudiate her again. But we'll see. She can definitely damage the prosecution's case.
Yeah, I'm just going to... Mr. Arenberg, I'm just going to interrupt you at the top of the stairs. There we are, quick wave. Donald Trump going on board. We had a long lens on that, bit of a closer shot there of him, his staff members, his security going on board too. So he's in the plane. He's whisked away. I just want to talk through the indictment itself. I know you've said you were surprised at the level of personal involvement that Trump had in all of this. The fact that they said he was involved in packing the boxes right from the White House. You know, he can't blame anybody else. He was the one looking through the boxes. He was the one directing his valet, the indictment says, to move them and what room they went into. You know, give me a sense of what you think his role is from that indictment that we had from the special counsel.
That, to me, is one of the most damning things about the indictment. It's the fact that Trump's fingerprints is all over this mess. He helped pack the boxes, store the boxes, move the boxes, hide the boxes, and then tried to disseminate information from the boxes. He can't blame this on the coffee boy. He did it himself. And then his greatest offense is that, well, he declassified everything. But then there was a recording of him mentioned in the indictment where he said, I can't show you this document because I haven't declassified it. I used to be able to do it when I was president. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. And that debunks his entire defense. That's why he's in a lot of trouble. I think the only way he gets out of this is if there are a number of Trump supporters on the jury and they just don't want to do anything to send their guy to the prison cell.
Well, indeed, and Judge Aileen Callan will set parameters for jury selection as well, won't she? So, you know, I did hear today that perhaps if it is a Trump Trump-appointed judge, and somebody who's had their knuckles rapped already, then actually that's best for justice, because people can't point the finger at her and say she's biased against him. So in fact, there might be upsides to that if she's learnt her lesson from, you know, the appeal against her, that she was acting favourably for Trump in the earlier matters about these documents. So that is one thing. What do you make of the counts themselves, 1 to 31? That's the detail of the documents themselves, how serious they were, how much they put national security at risk, how grave they made personnel in the field. You know, will we see some of those documents eventually if the case comes to trial?
The public won't see the documents unless there are some that are declassified. Some of these involve nuclear secrets. Some of them involve attack plans on Iran. I mean, this is really serious stuff that could put human intelligence sources at risk. We may see some others, though. And I think that's one of the reasons why this case may get delayed past the election, because you're dealing with all of these classified documents that fall under federal law. It's not so easy just to show them to defense counsel in advance. They have to be cleared, get classification to go see them, you know, to get clearance, to go view them. And then there's a question of admissibility in court. So I think this thing is going to go past the 2024 election, which is what Trump wants, because he hopes that he can get pardoned by a future Republican president, and he hopes it's going to be himself.
Does he have a defense? Do you see a way through? Do you see a presentation of defense here?
The only defense I see is that he believed he declassified the documents, but that's where the recording comes into play. It completely debunks the entire defense. I mean, it's his own words on the recording. You know, people lie, but recordings don't. So I don't know how he's going to get out of this, except maybe try to provide some red meat to the jurors who may be supportive of him, like conspiracy theories, to try to get one juror who's a Trump voter on the juror who will go his way. And that's all it takes for a hung jury. It just takes 1 out of 12. And if this case is tried in Miami-Dade County, 46% of Miami-Dade County went for Donald Trump. That means 46% of 12 people is 5.5. 5.5 jurors would have voted for Trump on average. All it takes is 1 for a hung jury.
But I suppose the prosecution only needs to get 1 count found against him, don't they?
But it has to be unanimous, and you have to have unanimous 12-member jury to convict him. I think the evidence is really powerful, but can they get a unanimous jury against the most polarizing individual in the history of our country?
No, sorry, I was interrupting. Why does it need to be unanimous?
Criminal juries have to be unanimous. Under the law, when you're talking about someone's guilt or innocence, it's got to be unanimous. So if you find them guilty, it's not by a majority. It's got to be unanimous, all 12 jurors.
And just one final thought, your best bet. When will the trial happen? Will he be found guilty, and will he go to jail?
These are all tough questions. I think the trial is going to happen after the 2024 election. I think Trump is going to push for delays. I think Judge Cannon will accommodate him. I think he will be found guilty. I'm an optimist because I believe the evidence is there. Whether he actually gets put in jail is another matter. The judge will decide, Judge Cannon. She may go way below the sentencing guidelines to give him extra leniency. So I still have trouble imagining Donald Trump wearing an orange jumpsuit and a pair of steel bracelets. But I still think in the end, he gets held accountable for the crimes and gets convicted. Jail time is another matter.
Dave Arenberg, State Attorney for Palm Beach County. Thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are watching Trump Force One, as they call it, Boeing 757, waiting to take off from Miami International Airport. It has been quite a day for the 45th US President, Donald J. Trump, who has faced 37 counts in a federal courthouse here in Miami. His crowds and his detractors outside, certainly, but an extraordinary atmosphere, which will give him heart that actually people were willing to come out and support him. John Sparks is here. You were in the melee. You felt that atmosphere, did you not? You know, it's quieting down now, finally. They've been here since 10 o'clock this morning, many of these people. And the authorities, there's a lot of police still here, presumably relieved that they got through this.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the police in Miami will be happy to see the back of Donald Trump. I put that mildly, but things have gone pretty well. They haven't experienced any major difficulties here. There were certainly big concerns. I mean, remember the fact that people can actually carry weapons in Florida. They have to keep them concealed, but they can carry weapons. And I think one of the concerns, one of the major concerns, is that you would get an argument within the crowd between pro-Donald Trump supporters and anti-Donald Trump supporters, and then it could turn into something else. That you have an unpredictable situation here. But I think one key thing is that the numbers weren't huge. We certainly had several hundred pro-Donald Trump supporters, but not the thousands or even the tens of thousands that were predicted. And we did have Donald Trump going on social media, asking people to come to the center of Miami to support him during this process. So we haven't seen major trouble. I think Donald Trump will probably be pretty happy with how it's all gone. He's had another platform here. He's had a chance to essentially work on his campaign. He's got his message out, and he's found a lot of people here who have enjoyed the opportunity to express their views. You had this extraordinary situation around the courtroom or the court complex, where you've had the major American broadcasters and international broadcasters, like ourselves as well, set up in these tents where the Trump supporters could approach and tell media commentators and pundits exactly what they thought about them. And obviously they feel that many of the media outlets here distribute fake news. And we saw a lot of barracking. On one occasion I saw police officers on bicycles have to wheel themselves in to separate the protesters from the media commentators who were trying to comment on the proceedings here. But generally, I think the mood here has been oddly celebratory. Difficult to describe. It's been quite almost joyous. And that's hard to understand because we've got Donald Trump. He was upstairs having the charges, 37 very serious federal criminal charges read out to him, and him pleading not guilty to all of them. He left on bail.
Let's look ahead to the rest of today. No doubt he might take the opportunity for this, or during this 3-hour flight, to have a sleep, a nap. You have to remember that the lead candidates for next year's election will have a combined age then of 160. He's 77 tomorrow. He'll have a rest, or he'll plan his fundraising tonight. He's already been asking people for money, hasn't he, today? And then he'll make remarks, won't he? 1:15 UK time, 8:15 from his golf course, no doubt making some of the points we've heard today. But he needs to turn the narrative around from 37 very serious charges, doesn't he? That's the aim of today by then for him. Yeah, and I think some people will argue that he has done that quite successfully. He gets another chance. We believe at his country club in New Jersey, the Bedminster Golf Club, he will make a speech there, and he will continue with this narrative, with this attack on the judiciary. There is a narrative here that the Biden administration, the Department of Justice, the FBI, they're out to get him. They're playing politics via another means, that they see him as the main challenger in the upcoming presidential election, and he almost certainly will get the Republican nomination, and they're trying to take him out that way. Yep. Let's just listen to Trump and those comments he made and the support he got in that Cuban cafe while the plane taxis.
The outside.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Some birthday. We got a government that's out of control. great group.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Donald. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. New York Times right there. It's a great photography.
We got these next right here.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh,
Really nice. Thank you.
How did it go?
I think it's going great.
Okay,
I think it's a rigged deal here. We have a rigged country. We have a country that's corrupt. We have a country that's got no borders. We have a country that's got nothing but problems. We're a nation in decline, and then they do this stuff. And you see where the people are. We love the people, and you see where they are. You see the crowds and everything else. We have a country that is in decline like never before, and we can't let it happen. I'm going to make a little speech tonight in Bedminster, and I hope you're going to be there.
Can you start tomorrow?
I hope you're going to be there. You can come too if you want. Okay? Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
God bless Donald Trump.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, when I arrived at the courthouse in Miami earlier today, there was a Trump detractor shouting at supporters saying, don't film them, don't give them the oxygen of publicity. But there we have the Trump plane on one side and Trump himself on the other. Apologies if we have, but this is a historic moment in U.S. politics. There's never been a time when a former U.S. president has faced federal charges. You know, it's significant, it's serious, and the road to trial lies ahead for him, John.
That's right. I mean, it is unprecedented. We haven't been in this situation before. Absolutely fascinating that Donald Trump is now attacking the judiciary, the legal process in this country, in a way that he has done with the electoral system as well when he lost the election to Biden. It's the same type of tactic to discredit the election system in this country. He's doing the same with the judiciary, and he's playing with a narrative that appeals to a lot of people, that essentially the legal process is for sale. It's run by a corrupt government, that the judges are corrupt. He said the same thing about the electoral process as well. And I think it's a really interesting contrast there. On one hand, he is dismissing the institutions in the United States that a lot of people feel are very robust. But on the other hand, what I think we have witnessed here is a celebration of the vigorous nature of democracy in the United States. What we have seen are supporters for Donald Trump. We have seen detractors as well, peacefully commingling for the most part, not the entire time. We saw a pretty nasty scuffle at the very end, but peacefully coexisting for the most part. That is American democracy as we know it. We didn't see the trouble that was predicted, encouraged by, arguably, by some of Donald Trump's supporters. So there's a real contrast there. We've got this exhibition of American democracy, and then we've got Donald Trump undermining some of the institutions, the legal process, the electoral system in this country at the very same time.
The number of times we've sat on pictures of this plane, it's hard to calculate, to be fair. I'm just going to bring you some words, actually, from MSNBC's legal analyst, Lisa Rubin, who was in the courtroom, in fact, and she made a number of observations about what she saw during the proceedings. First of all, Mr. Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, took his time whispering to Donald Trump during the hearing. Not only that, he also frequently talked directly to the co-defendant, Donald Trump's valet, Walt Nauta, and to Nauta's attorney, Stanley Woodward, together. This is highly unusual. And while the hearing ended, all of the Secret Service agents sitting in the 2 rows directly behind the defense table stood up to flank Trump, and then they surrounded him to escort him out. But rather than simply look ahead and leave, there's the plane's going off. I'll hold my thoughts as we watch this. So Donald Trump leaving Florida, heading to his summer residence, Bedminster, New Jersey. He'll be landing in Newark in about 3 hours' time. Packed schedule for him this evening, a fundraiser, statements to the press, and tomorrow his 77th birthday. I'm just going to return to what we heard from that legal analyst. So instead of leaving with his Secret Service detail, he turned around and stared down all of the people in the courtroom, scowling and seemingly scanning for somebody he knew. And then as Trump left, Norton left with him, his co-defendant, falling into the line of agents trailing him. It was as if he flipped a switch and went from being a co-defendant to resuming his duties as Trump's aide in a heartbeat. Fascinating stuff. Norton, as one person commented, was the man who always got the president his Diet Cokes, worked at the White House with him and at Mar-a-Lago, so clearly a trusted aide. And as someone said to me earlier, Donald Trump always surrounds himself with people he trusts. These pictures, exclusively filmed by Sky News earlier, of him leaving his golf resort at Doral before he headed to the courthouse here in Miami, where he was arrested, processed, arraigned, charges, of course, being presented to him in that hearing today. Quite a day. Quick 30 seconds from you, John.
Quite a day, an unprecedented day, a historic day in the United States, and it begs the question, where do we go from here? How does this affect the campaign for the next presidency in the United States? Where does this put Donald Trump? Could he be imprisoned? Could that happen before the next presidential election? Very interesting. I think what his legal team will do is try to slow the whole legal process down, and he will use it. He will use this story, this so-called story of persecution, political persecution by Biden, by the Biden administration and the Department of Justice. He will use it. He will use it for his own benefit to serve him and his electoral ambitions. Of that, I am absolutely sure.
John Sparks, our international correspondent, thank you very much indeed. So Trump on his way to Newark, then to Bedminster. We'll hear from him 8:15 local time. That is 1:15 in the morning. We'll give you that live, obviously. Full analysis of this, of course, and all of the rest of today's news coming up in Sky News at 10, when we'll be live from both Nottingham and Miami.
It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Nottingham, a city tonight in shock.